Good morning. This is the Tuesday, June 30th meeting of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. I'm Mike Fewer. I'm the chair of the committee. We do not yet have a quorum, but we are prepared to proceed with a few announcements initially. There are several items that have been taken off today's calendar. Those include item number 8, which is SB 392 by Senator Flores. Item number 16, SB 660 by Senator Woke. And item number 19, SB 782 by Senator Yee. Also, item 4 has been moved from the current today's file to the consent calendar, which we'll vote on as soon as we have a quorum. Having said that, we have with us Senator Corbett, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who's here to present several matters this morning. First, item 2, SB 95. Senator Corbett, welcome.
That red button throws me off every time. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I'm pleased to be here to present SB 95. It addresses a problem that has been created by our current state of the economy. We have seen a growing number of car dealers selling or trading cars that they have taken in as trade-in, and then they may sell the car and never pay off the loan. And sometimes even that car is sold to another party before that loan is paid off. This is a huge problem for consumers who innocently purchase a car and are left with ruined credit, repossession of that vehicle sometimes a loss of job due to lack of transportation, and even bankruptcy. SB 95 addresses this problem by requiring dealers to pay off the lien of the trade-in vehicle before they can be traded or sold. And this must occur within 20 days of the vehicle being traded in. I've worked closely with all of the opposition, the New Car Dealers Association, and the amendments that we are taking are removing opposition. They too want to solve this problem. SB 95 also increases the dealer's license fee by $25 to help pay for additional Department of Motor Vehicle inspectors. And I believe this is a good compromise that will protect consumers who have innocently traded in vehicles that they owe money on. Under this new law, the car cannot be sold or traded until the dealer pays off the lien. Cars today are traded almost like commodities, so by slowing down this process, we're helping protect consumers and we're improving confidence by consumers in our car market, which is very important at this time. With me today is Rosemary Shahan with the Consumers for Auto Reliability and Safety. She's here to testify in support, and I believe you might have some consumers today who have been victimized by this current practice to tell their story as well.
Thank you very much, Senator Corbett. Your first witness in support.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm Rosemary Shahan, President of Consumers for Auto Reliability and Safety, and we're the sponsors of the bill. And we greatly appreciate Senator Corbett's leadership in offering this bill. We see it as a vitally important consumer protection measure to restore confidence in California's car market, so people feel like they can go to a dealership and trade in a vehicle where they still owe money and have it paid off in a timely way and end up with a fair deal. And this will also protect consumers who buy those cars, who sometimes make every payment in full and on time, only to have the car repossessed by the former owner's lien holder. And it's a serious problem nationally. It's far worse in California than any other state, and we would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next witness in support.
I'm Stephanie Feliciano. I'm a consumer that had bought a car, and in March of 2007, I had bought a car. I traded my car in, put a down payment on a car, and drove off the lot with another car. And I thought everything was fine until August of 2007 when I went to go rent an apartment and found out that the dealership had never paid off my car in March. So at that point in time, I went back down to the dealership and asked them to pay it off. And what ended up happening was that they had sent out checks that weren't that were false checks, and they ended up bouncing as the finance company tried to pay them off. And then at the end of the last check they had sent to them, they had closed their bank account, so my finance company couldn't, get the money to pay off my car. And so basically, I went back to the dealership and asked them to write me a letter saying that this is their fault, not mine. And they did that, and at the end of that day, they came and rebuilt the car that I had actually purchased from them. So I walked away with no car, not the trade-in that I walked out with, and no down payment and no car. So I was without nothing at that point, and I don't want this to happen to anybody else, basically.
Thank you for your testimony and for coming here to try to prevent other people from enduring the same problem. Next witness in support.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Peverini on behalf of the Consumer Attorneys of California in support of the bill.
Next in support.
Mr. Chair, Member Scott Governor, on behalf of the California Financial Services Association, I apologize for not getting our support letter in on time. This has been a fluid process. We do, however, support the bill as amended because we are the lien holders in this situation. So
I'm sure the author believes that no apology is in order when you're here late to support.
Right. Mr. Chair, Phil Vermeulen, representing the American Contractors Indemnity. We're the third largest bond company in the state. Although we support the bill, we've got a problem, and that is the way the bond is written now, the dealers are able to claim on the bonds. What's happening is we're having to pay out whoever first requests payout on the bond, and there's no money left for the consumers. So what we've requested, and in the previous version it was a sublimit for dealers. Whether it's $20,000, $10,000, whatever you lower that to, then that provides money for both the DMV and for the consumers. Right now, as the bill's written, a dealer can buy cars from one dealer to another and then go bankrupt, pull out the money on the bond. There's nothing left for the consumer. So we would strongly urge that there be a sublimit put into the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Others in support.
Mr. Chair, Crystal Jack on behalf of CarMax. We've been working with the author, and we are going to support the bill as proposed to be amended.
Thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses in support? Now, before we hear from the opposition, we have a quorum. Let's call the roll.
Fuhr?
Here.
Tran? Here. Brownlee? Evans? Jones? Knight? Here. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Here. Silva? Here.
Okay. Since we have a quorum, why don't we just quickly interrupt to have a motion on the consent calendar? Is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second?
Hello.
Is there a second on the consent calendar? Thank you. Call the roll.
Fuhr?
Aye.
Fuhr, aye. Tran? Tran, aye. Brownlee? Aye. Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Knight? Aye. Knight, aye. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva? Aye. Silva, aye.
We've established a quorum now. Witnesses in opposition.
Mr. Chair, members, Brian Moss with the California New Car Dealers Association. As Senator Corbett explained, we have worked out in a compromise with the author, and today I'm proud to announce we are removing our opposition to the bill as proposed to be amended. Coupled with the Consumer Motor Vehicle Recovery Fund, California's law will be the most protective of consumers in the unfortunate circumstance when trade-in liens are not paid off by dealers. Now we have a fund to help consumers when dealers are broke and don't pay it off, and with Senator Corbett's bill, when it gets enacted, we'll have a 21 calendar day deadline. We think that's a great protection for consumers, and we were able to work out the technical language through the hard work of your staff as well as Senator Corbett's staff and the sponsors, and we're happy to remove our opposition today.
Thank you, Mr. Moss, for that dramatic testimony, which enabled you to actually get some additional words in, which otherwise wouldn't have been permissible if you come in on support. Others in opposition to the measure? Are the witnesses in opposition? Who really are in opposition?
Mr. Chairman and members, Bill Doring with the Used Car Dealers Association. We also have removed our opposition, but we really do support the increase in the renewal of the renewal fees for the dealers, because that money will be earmarked for investigators, and that, quite frankly, was an industry bill sponsored by us for the $15. So we'd like to work with investigations and get after the bad dealers.
Thank you very much. Are there any witnesses in opposition to the measure?
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Dennis Clear, Department of Motor Vehicles. We are opposed to the May 28th version. We just saw the amendments. We're looking at them. We do believe it does go a long way to addressing our concerns about the problem in the industry, but we still need to look at the analysis of the bill.
Okay, so at this point, you were opposed to the prior iteration of the measure. You haven't had a chance to analyze this one. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Witnesses in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, James Lombard on behalf of the California Motorcycle Dealers Association. This bill talks about the car dealers, the California Car Buyers Protection Act. It should be directed at car dealers, not at motorcycle dealers. Or included in this bill We've proposed amendment after amendment to be removed, and they have refused to do so. We're not the problem. We work with our customers, and you're taking a tank to go after a problem you should be using a sniper with. So we would remove our opposition if we have amendments which will take motorcycle dealers out of this Car Protection Act.
What is it about the bill that you believe is detrimental to motorcycle dealers?
I think the portion of the 21 days, if one of our staff first of all, we've reduced the number of staff, our dealerships, because of the recession. We were a $3 billion industry, and we've really cut back. We've had to reduce staff. We've brought families back in to do the business. And if we inadvertently don't pay a vehicle off, the penalties that come in because of that.
But if you fail to pay off the prior owner, pay what is owed on the vehicle from the previous owner, isn't the purchaser of a motorcycle situated identically to the purchaser?
We have a bond to protect that, Mr. Chairman. It's a $10,000 bond. It's been in effect every time that we've dealt with this issue. AB 68 by Assembly Member Montañez dealt with this issue, and motorcycles were exempt out of that act. Motorcycle bonds are at $10,000 because of the value of the vehicles that we sell.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr.
Are the witnesses
Chairman,
in opposition? Okay, seeing none, are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Mr. Silva. By the way, welcome again, Mr. Silva. Mr. Silva is here because Mr. Nielsen is still embroiled in the budget discussions. Glad to have you, Mr. Silva, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am still new to this, and Senator, I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm appalled that things like this happen. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong, and this is definitely wrong, and you're trying to correct a right. And I just think that it's a very good bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Silva.
I'm so glad you're on this committee.
Yeah, because Mr. Nielsen went pretty shaky on this measure. Are there others who are here other people from the committee who wish to speak on the bill, either with questions or their observations? Senator, you've heard from the motorcycle dealers. Do you have any response to the motorcycle dealers?
Well, you know, if you were over on the Senate side following the work that we've done on this bill, you would understand that a lot of work has been done on this. And this is an extremely serious problem where someone trades in a vehicle, whether it be a motorcycle or a car, and often purchase a new vehicle only to find out that the dealer does not pay on that lien, and their credit rating is ruined, and their new vehicle often gets repossessed as well. Sometimes their small business is destroyed because they have no ability to borrow money any longer because of what happened with this transaction. All these people are doing is innocently purchasing a vehicle, which is very important. We want to encourage that in our economy today. And the bill originally allowed for payoff in 24 hours. We extended that to 4 days, and it's now 21 days. A dealer has 21 days to pay off a vehicle after taking it in trade-in. I think that's a very fair compromise, and all a dealer has to do is comply with that, and they would have no worry about this new law.
Thank you. Mr. Tran.
Senator, I had a chance to look at the numbers, the fees, and the costs. Can you explain to us as far as how you derive to those numbers, and specifically?
The numbers, we receive them upon discussion with the car dealers and the DMV, and the fee is $25 for not paying off in a timely fashion. And that helps the DMV inspectors, as you heard one of the witnesses testify. It helps the DMV have the inspectors to ensure that good dealers are protected and the bad dealers are following the law.
And there's also a $50 and a $40 fee as well, correct? 50 for...
Yeah, it's all based on the license fee that the dealers pay. And those are the numbers that we worked on with. Those are the numbers that were acceptable to everyone.
Okay, very well.
Well, most people, I should say. There's one opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Committee members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Senator Corbett, we should close.
Just appreciate your aye vote. The one comment I would make is that we were working on the bond issue. It just proved to be a little too complex to get that completed in this bill, but we will continue to work with the folks that allow the bonds to see if we can solve that problem as well in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there a motion on the bill? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Fuhr?
Aye.
Fuhr, aye. Tran? Aye. Tran, aye. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Knight? Aye. Knight, aye. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva?
Aye.
Silva, aye.
That has 6 votes and is out. Senator
you very
Corbett,
much.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
have
much, members.
Item number 11, SB 510.
Thank you very much. Let me just start by accepting the author's amendments. They're in the analysis and reflected in the mock-up. SB 510 is a consensus bill. It has no known opposition. It's also a bill that will help consumers by providing clarity and consistency in the court approval of transfers of structured settlements by giving the court critical information needed to allow the court to make an informed decision. My office has been working with the structured settlement companies and the factoring or purchasing companies to develop a product that provides the maximum consumer protections and at the same time is workable for the courts. The California Judges Association shows that by their support of SB 510. A structured settlement, which is sometimes called a periodic payment, is a financial or insurance arrangement including periodic payments that a plaintiff accepts to resolve a personal injury tort claim or to compromise a statutory periodic payment obligation. California law permits the sale or assignment of California structured settlement payment rights subject to a court's review and approval based upon a showing that the proposed transfer is in the consumer's best interest and is fair and reasonable. SB 510 augments the amount and type of information that must be provided to the court in order to better ensure that the transfer approvals are in the best interest of the consumer and society. This increased transparency would serve to facilitate California compliance with federal law. The product before you is a result of countless meetings with stakeholders, and I'm happy to have the support not only of consumer groups, but the consumer attorneys and also the National Association of Settlement Purchasers, and I'd ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Corbett. Your witnesses in support who were agreeing that there were indeed countless meetings. I could see them accede to that.
Yes, they were.
First witness in support.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Christine Spagnoli, President of Consumer Attorneys of California, and we're quite pleased to sponsor this bill with Senator Corbett. Really, the bill does 2 things. It provides more information to judges and consumers who are the recipients of these structured settlement payments so that we can be sure that their obligations to others, such as child support payments and things of that nature, are not compromised by the sale of structured settlement payments. And we know that the judges were concerned because they weren't quite sure. They needed more guidance as to what information they could get, ask for, and questions that they could ask in terms of determining whether a sale of a structured settlement payment was appropriate for the payee and also for their related beneficiaries. It also, secondly, provides for notice to the prior attorneys who helped the consumer in the beginning obtain the structured settlement. This just simply allows them to be aware of the conversation about the sale and to, if their former client so wishes, consult with them about the sale. And we were very pleased to work closely with the structured settlement purchasers as well as the structured settlement companies to come up with a bill that we think is going to make this California law the strongest consumer protection bill in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
My name's Earl Nesbitt. Excuse me. Thank you. My name's Earl Nesbitt. I'm Executive Director of the National Association of Settlement Purchasers, and we are pleased to be here in support of Senate Bill 510 on behalf of the men and women who represent the companies who provide this liquidity option to people across the country. About 7 to 9% of people who have structured settlements find a situation in their lives where they need to have liquidity, and this bill ensures that they are guaranteed that option and that they are protected. We were very pleased to work with Senator Corbett and her staff. They worked very hard on this. Assemblyman Tran assisted us with making some adjustments to the bill, and we appreciate very much his efforts and the efforts of his staff. And finally, thank the consumer attorneys, because they took the time to actually understand our business and what we were trying to do and what we were about. And they worked very closely to us, listened to us, and we were able to work out something that we believe will now ensure that Californians have this opportunity to access this financial asset in an orderly process that's fair to all interested parties with full notice and disclosure. And I echo the request of Ms. Spagnoli that urge this committee to support the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. This witness in support.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, James Lombard on behalf of the Settlement Planners for Consumer Rights, insurance and agents and brokers that do these transactions, and we're in support of the bill. Senator.
Thank you. Are there witnesses who haven't testified yet in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, members of the committee, questions, comments? Mr. Tran.
I believe I'm a co-author of your bill.
Very good.
So
Thank you so
happy
much.
to join forces with you.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman.
Yes, Mr. Tran has also done very good work in this area. Others with questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion? Well, actually, Ms. Corbett, do you want us to close?
Just ask for your aye vote and thank all the hard work that went into this final product.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion? So moved. It's been moved and seconded, I'll call it. Let's call the roll, please.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran?
Aye.
Tran, aye. Brownlee? Aye. Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Aye. Jones, aye. Knight? Aye. Knight, aye. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva? Aye. Silva, aye.
Okay, that bill is out. Congratulations, Senator Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair
much.
and members. Thank you very much.
Okay. Although not next in sign-in order, I do see Mr. Padilla here. Senator Padilla is here on item number 9, SB 407. Welcome, Senator Padilla.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is SB 407, and it is before you as proposed to be amended. And in short, what this bill seeks to do is to trigger the retrofit of a lot of water fixtures in homes to more water efficient fixtures, both actually in the residential as well as multifamily and commercial sectors. Not as a single tool, but as an important tool in the overall toolbox to achieve the water use reductions that we know we need in the state of California, given the future of our water supply. So as you can see through the details, and I won't walk you through every single bullet point, but the trigger dates from 2011, 2014, 2017 of when certain fixtures, toilets, sinks, that sort of thing, shower heads, would need to be retrofitted or replaced with the higher efficiency appliances based on either renovations or significant remodel or change of ownership. We've actually taken amendments to come away from the point of sale requirement, but we still maintain a disclosure requirement upon the sale of residential property. The sponsor of the bill is Metropolitan Water District, and they're here to answer any questions. I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. First witness in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, one of 3 co-sponsors on the bill. By just why we're doing and promoting this bill. For the first time since 1991, Metropolitan has reduced supplies delivered to our 26-member public agencies. When you consider the cuts already made to our ag customers, our groundwater replenishment deliveries, along with the restrictions that our board adopted for our wholesale deliveries, the total amounts nearly to a 20% reduction in water usage for Southern California. Replacing an old, inefficient toilet with a new one can save 31 gallons per day, every day, for years. Cities throughout our service area, from LA to San Diego, have accelerated the retirement of inefficient toilets by requiring their replacement at time of resale. It is a proven effective reform that would provide dramatic water savings throughout California if implemented on a statewide basis. And as the Senator has mentioned, we have moved away from a point-of-sale transaction to a date-certain approach for single-family, multifamily, and commercial businesses. For all these reasons, I urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness in support.
Mr. Chair and members, Don Gilbert, representing San Francisco PUC, another co-sponsor of the bill. Appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others in support?
Kim Lewis with Green Plumbers and the Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling Contractors of California, and we think any water conservation measures are really important to California as we're in our third year of a drought.
Thank you. Others in support?
Mr. Chair, members, Rosario Capeller on behalf of the California Municipal Utilities Association, also in support.
Next witness in support.
Good morning, Marissa Fresquez from Planning Conservation League. I support this bill.
Please continue.
Duncan McFetters representing the State Pipe Trades Council in support of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Stan Weig with the California Association of Realtors. We were formally in opposition to this bill, but with the movement away from a time of sale mandate or requirement, we're going to a neutral position on the bill. There's one tweak that needs to be done in the language, we think, to make it clear that it's not completely a time of sale mandate, and that's the issue of disclosing compliance in addition to disclosing the existence of the law. Our understanding with the senator over in the Senate was that we would disclose in the transactional documents and in the TDS that the new law is coming at you. After 2014, you'll have to do it any kind of retrofit in connection with the building permit, and after 2017, you'll have to do it on all properties. And the language in your analysis reflects the language that's in the bill amendment right now, and that issue is a two-part disclosure, one of compliance and one of the new law. Our understanding, and we believe we have a meeting in the minds, but our understanding and our neutrality is based on disclosing the existence of the law, and compliance obligation would follow at some later time, but it's not to be in the TDS and not to be in a transaction now. That's the issue, because we have to do an inspection, an additional inspection, and additional exposure for the seller if we do that.
Before we lose the thought, while others are here in support, Senator Padilla, do you wish to respond to that testimony?
Yeah, that is my understanding, but we're just trying to navigate. There was other people in the room. We just want to make sure everybody's sort of on the same page with that impression. So just trying to navigate a few sponsors, not just one.
Okay. Next witness in support.
Hugh Bauer on behalf of the City of Burbank Water and Power in support.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
My name's Anthony Williams, representing Friends of the River, and we stand in support.
Thank you. Others in support?
Mr. Chair and members, my name is Matthew Arg with the California Business Properties Association. I represent about 10,000 members in the commercial, industrial, and retail real estate industry. We're formally in opposition to this bill, but we've been working very hard with the author and with the sponsors. I want to thank them very much for working through many of our concerns. There's language, I believe, that we have an agreement on that will that will address our concerns with this bill, and we look forward to working with the author as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Other witnesses in opposition? Wait, the bill already requires it. So what do they say? They want to take it out. First witness in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ron Kingston, representing the Apartment Association California Southern Cities. This bill, we have been in the author's office probably every other day since the date of introduction, because we view this as a critically important measure. It will affect all multifamily residential rental housing. More than 2 months ago, we submitted amendments. We've been working with the author. We're down to basically 3 issues, 3 very, very important issues, and I want to focus just on 2 of them, and Mr. Smock will finish up with the last one. The first issue that we have been talking about is this. It's critically important that once we comply, that we state that we have a safe harbor of 20 years. Mr. Padilla has agreed on that. We're working on crafting legislation. We also look forward to working with your committee staff, wherever Anthony is here, to actually assure that. And the reason for that is that once we do this, we will spend not just millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars statewide doing these compliance issues, retrofitting all toilets, faucets, interior faucets, and shower heads in all your multifamily residential housing throughout the state. The second issue in connection with this deals with the issue of what about what the local governments have already done in this regard addressing these issues. And we have reached agreement on this point, and we will be working on drafting that legislation with your counsel, Mr. Feuer, and the staff of Mr. Padilla. And that is that we've reached agreement that any city that has already adopted a water conservation ordinance with regard to these types of devices will be grandfathered in, and that will be no stronger or worse, because we don't want to be forced to make the change today, 5 years from now, another change, and 5 years from now, another change. So, and for all local governments that have already agreed, that have not adopted the ordinance, they would be required to follow the terms of this bill. Those are the real important issues that we see. And finally, the last issue is on disclosure. This bill requires infinite disclosure in the transactional documents. Once we comply, that we will always be required to make that disclosure for future purchasers of multifamily housing.
Mr. Kingston, your time has elapsed. Would you conclude your testimony, please?
The conclusion is this. We're working with the author. The preemption and the safe harbor are critically important to craft out, and we would hope that this is going to be done well before the floor vote on this bill.
Thank you. Others in opposition?
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm John Smock, representing the Apartment Association of Orange County, and together with Mr. Kingston, we have been working on this bill with the author staff since the beginning. We have two significant issues that we had submitted amendments for. We wanted to track the ability to enter the union, each unit. Residential, multifamily residential is a little bit different from commercial. There is a provision, 1952, of the Civil Code, which permits us to enter dwelling units, but not necessarily to install these kinds of fixtures. So, and to test these fixtures. So we wanted to be very clear that we have the authority to do that. We had submitted language. It's the same language that is in another bill before you today, SB 183. We settled all of the problems with respect to entrance to the dwelling unit for the purpose of installing CO devices. And we would encourage the committee and the author to accept that. The other aspect of that is we don't want to be responsible and cited for non-compliant fixtures that have been altered by the tenant. There's no requirement in this bill that the tenant notify us of a difficulty with the compliant unit. And again, there is language that we submitted to the author, and we would hope that the committee and the author would adopt that language from Senate Bill 183 again, where we have clear authority to act upon notice from the tenant and not be cited for alteration of a unit where it has been altered by a tenant. So those are two significant issues that we would encourage the committee to adopt.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Other witnesses in opposition? Okay. Seeing none, Senator, do you wish to respond to the opposition?
I think they describe it accurately. They've raised their issues. I think there's an agreement in concept. We're still working on specific language, though, so we're not quite there, but would hope to be there in short order.
Thank you. Committee members, questions or comments for the author? Mr. Tran.
Thank you,
Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for your leadership on this issue. My concern is more financial, especially in the economic downturn. With this bill, the effect that it may have, even when it's going to be implemented in the outlying years, can anyone tell me on average how much it would cost?
Yes.
With an average home, if you're going to go into compliance with the changes with all the plumbing fixtures?
Thank you, Assemblyman Tran. Kathy Colligan with the Metropolitan Water District. We've done some look at the retail market availability of the complete toilet would be on the low end $157, high end $243. Faucets $18 to $49. Shower heads $15.40 to $43. And again, a number of water agencies throughout the state actually offer rebate programs to help incentivize the homeowner and the property owner to do the retrofits. So there is some funding available to help offset those costs.
And the source of that information is not a foundation or an institute. It's entities. I think you may know it as Home Depot.
Of course. But if you have 2 or 3 faucets or 2 or 3 toilets, then obviously all of those will be changed. So multiplying by 2 or 3, correct? At least on average per home.
For a complete toilet, for 2 toilets, complete set, tank and bowl, $300 for the actual retail purchase thereof from a Home Depot, as the Senator mentioned.
Okay. In terms of the labor, is there a cost associated with that, depending on?
A large measure, homeowners could do their work themselves, but if they do require a professional, that would all be at the standard rate for plumber. We also do have language in the bill that would exempt for those older properties that may not be technically feasible to make the installation change. There is an exemption from the bill for those kind of properties.
Parallel with issues related to the financials is I know that local cities or municipalities also have similar legal provisions.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. First of all, recognize those that have local programs. Those are grandfathered in. We're not undoing those or replacing those. But we want to build on the success that we've seen in several local jurisdictions on a statewide basis. I appreciate your concerns about the cost, and we're not going to deny that there is a cost to all of this, but we think it's reasonable for the benefits to be achieved, and that's conserving water, which is a limited source, an increasingly limited source in all parts of the state. So we've seen it successful at the local level, and we think it's reasonable. We try to be accommodating given the down housing market, the down economy, but pushing the compliance dates and the trigger dates out a couple of years. So when you're looking at timeframes of 2014, 2017, 2019, we believe it's reasonable.
Well, thank you. I think Mr. Kingston, if he's shaking his head.
Mr. Tran, perhaps I can shed some light on this, just going through some retrofit and commercial property. Plumbers always charge more for commercial and multifamily housing. It's just the standard of the industry. For every toilet, we did a survey how much it costs in 3 metropolitan areas. $125 a toilet, generally speaking, for the plumber's bill. And assuming that there are no problems that they incur where they have to shut off all the water to the whole area to replace some wall issues. Toilets usually run around $200, and whether it's Home Depot, Lowe's, or higher up. So you're looking at roughly $325 plus per toilet installed. Faucets generally run between $65 and for multifamily housing, we're not talking gold-plated fixtures, to roughly at $125 plus installation of $75 plus per faucet. As to shower heads are approximately $100 and $50 to install. So you're looking somewhere around $700 a unit for a small multifamily unit to install these types of fixtures.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. I would point out a couple things. First of all, of course, what hasn't been discussed is the counterbalancing savings to the consumer from the reduction in water use that he or she will experience in jurisdictions like our own. Mr. Padilla and I share the same city. There's been a recent escalation in water rates that will soon be replicated in other jurisdictions around the state as water supplies continue to dwindle, and those increased water rates are a meaningful factor for low-income consumers. So let me turn to Mr. Silva.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to commend the author. I think that it's a good idea, but there's also a lot of costs, I think, that we have to be concerned with, and some of them have been mentioned, but I think that we can't really expect a 60-year-old man that doesn't own a wrench to go on there and retrofit his home. That's
Mr. Silva, do you have any familiarity with that demographic?
What's that?
No, nothing.
I do own a wrench.
No,
That's what children are for, I believe.
But you also have to consider most people and the plumbers that I've dealt with need city permits. So now you're talking additional money into what you're talking about if you want to start changing toilets and faucets and everything else to make sure that it's done right. And I was on the board at South Coast AQMD, and they would come in with rules as far as scrubbers for painting facilities, coating furniture. And it'd be $1 million for a scrubber. The small business couldn't afford it. They'd have to borrow money. Before they would get down the road 2 or 3 years, there would be a new law that would require a new scrubber. They haven't even paid for the old one. And I really have a major concern with the state of California requiring certain things, and then we can go back in 3 years and require something completely different as technology changes. And it gets to be a point where it is not fair to the property owner, and I do have some major concerns, even though I think that you're doing a good job.
I appreciate the concerns. Again, the cost piece, I think we've addressed that. The part about changing regulation or standards, that we intend to address through the safe harbor provisions that was mentioned earlier.
Okay. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your indulgence. I'm Ron Davis. I'm with the Association of California Water Agencies. We're a co-sponsor of this measure for a couple of very important reasons. One, for saving water, and two, the point you just made yourself, which is over the lifetime, there will be a cost-effective savings in terms of investment as well. So it's a very important measure that's going to save quite a bit of water and a lot of water throughout the state of California, and it's going to be an important component of our overall comprehensive solution to meeting the water needs of the state of California over the next decades. And so we're very much in support of the bill, and I appreciate your opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And in terms of that efficacy, Mr. Padilla, as we mentioned earlier, is from Los Angeles, where, and now this has become the water committee for today, where the amount of water that the city uses is roughly the same as it used in 1987, with 1 million more people since, largely because the city of LA has taken steps just like those Mr. Padilla would promote as a statewide matter. And I think that's extremely important for us to bear in mind.
And there are communities throughout the state of California like that. Santa Clara Valley Water District, for example, for a 10-year period had the same use of water with a growth at a similar rate.
Yes. Other comments or questions from members of the committee?
If I may respond
Of course.
quickly, Mr. Chairman. You know, everyone is in agreement in terms of water conservation. I think the purpose of bringing up the issue of the financials is obvious, because if you talk about long-term conservation and savings, I mean that's long-term. That's basically the long-term policy of the state or the localities. But when you're talking about a hit right away within the specified period in which one has to go into compliance, anywhere between $500 to $700, if not $1,000, that's real money for low-income or limited income families. And for those renters and for those homeowners who are already on low income or limited income, I know that they're saving water because they know that they're going to have to pay it at the end of the month anyway. So that's the issue here. I mean, the counterbalance.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, that is why we have not opposed the policy behind the bill. Our interest from the beginning has been to make it work in the best way that it could be implemented. So we have a delayed operative date, and that's the provisions that we have talked about in opposition are procedural provisions to make it work.
Yes, in fact, thank you for that testimony, which I think reminds us that the two key components of the opposition testimony have been to assure that there be a meaningful right of entry into units, and also to assure that the grandfathering provisions that are currently in the measure are sufficient to not put an apartment owner in a position of having multiple requirements that may be inconsistent with each other, rather than opposition based on the cost of installation, of which you have not heard from the opponents. Mr. Padilla, do you wish to close?
Just one more time in response to some member Tran's concerns, just to reiterate on the single-family residential homes, the requirements would be in by 2011, just a disclosure of the law. By 2014, retrofits only in those properties that are undergoing or seek to undergo a renovation or modification of some sort, significant improvements to the property. And all homes would be required to be in compliance by January of 2017. So I think, again, we've allotted for a significant amount of time between now and then, and certainly amount of time for the economy and the housing market to rebound. So we've tried to be mindful. I think we've had a good discussion. I ask you all for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Is there a motion on the bill? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? No. Tran, no. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Evans, aye. Jones? Knight? No. Knight, no. Krikorian? Lou? Lou, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Silva? Silva, no.
That bill has 5 votes, Senator. It requires 1 more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Padilla. In sign-in order, our next senator here is Mr. Leno. Senator Leno is here on item number 12, SB 543. Senator Leno, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, welcome. Thank you. Committee members, good to be with you, and appreciate the opportunity to present SB 543. And let me begin by saying I'm pleased to accept the technical amendment made mention in the analysis. The bill will strike a better balance for at-risk youth who are seeking mental health services. Current law already permits youth to access a number of medical services without parental consent. This would be for circumstances such as drug and alcohol abuse, counseling, treatment for communicable diseases, and also for reproductive health services. That's current law. And this current state of affairs strikes a careful balance between the rights of parents and guardians and the public's interest in providing youth with essential medical care, especially in real-world circumstances, which we know can be very challenging. So what the bill will do is allows youth between the ages of 12 and 17 to consent to mental health treatment or counseling if an attending mental health professional believes the youth is mature enough to participate intelligently in the services. The bill still requires the involvement of minors' parents or guardian if and when a licensed professional determines that that is appropriate. And we know with Prop 63 monies available, there's more there are more resources for mental health services, and so this bill will increase youth access to mental health programs earlier on when we know that they can be that much more effective and can have even better results. And so I'd ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Leno. Witnesses in support.
So my name is Wendy Ray Hill. I'm with the National Association of Social Workers, and we're a co-sponsor of this measure. Thank you so much for considering it today. It's so important that we take a look at this issue because so many social workers and other mental health professionals aren't getting to actually treat youth until they get to the very dire circumstance of suicide or wanting to hurt somebody else. And we know that prevention and early intervention is the best way for both the youth but also the least costly way of treating. I'd like to turn the rest of my time over to Kyle Baudelaire.
Thank you very much. Next witness in support.
Hello, my name is Kyle Baudelaire. I'm 16 years old. I attend the Met High School here in Sacramento, and I also have an internship with the Senate desk. I know from personal experiences that sometimes you just need somebody to talk to without your parents necessarily knowing right then. In November, I was outed as being gay, and I just needed somebody to talk to. I did not want to talk to my grandma at the time. I didn't know how she would react. My crisis happened to be that I was gay and I just needed to come out, but other youth face many other crises. Peer pressure, drug abuse, parental abuse, pregnancy, and the list just goes on. I don't want to see any youth, LGBT or not, to feel the way I did or to get to the point that I did. It was horrible to feel like not waking up and feeling like you don't belong. When I think of all the youth that are unable to discuss their issue, it hurts me because I know how they feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It takes a lot of courage for you to be here today. We appreciate your testimony. Next witness in support.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Schwecke. I'm a school administrator and mental health clinician with the Sacramento City Unified School District. As you may know, school districts are increasingly aware of the vital role they play in providing social and emotional support services to students at risk of academic failure, truancy, and school dropout. Services such as mental health counseling can be extremely beneficial to students both on the emotional but as well as on the academic level. One of the major barriers we face in addressing these needs, though, is the difficulty we have sometimes in obtaining parental consent for counseling services. And there are many reasons for this, and I'll just name a few. Number one, many youth feel shame in disclosing to their parents that they're interested in counseling, whatever the reason. Number two, many youth are concerned that their parents will become aware of issues they're not yet prepared to share with them, such as academic struggles, relationship violence, bullying, same-sex attraction, and others. Number three, many parents are simply difficult to meet with. They're busy, they're working longer hours than ever. They may be reluctant to come to school, and especially in the high school years, they may be disengaged from their kids. And often children seek counseling precisely because they can't turn to their parents. So we want to be able to provide this support, particularly to those kids that don't have a place to turn. I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. A high school senior at McClatchy High School revealed to me that he is gay but afraid to talk to his parents about it. The student wanted counseling to help him figure out how to address this with his family and friends, but the current law allowed me to meet with him only one time. And at this time, these issues were causing him to be at risk of not graduating. So it was unfortunate that we couldn't meet with him more. Another example is that a 9th grade student at Kennedy High School had severe acting out behaviors, truancy, and was being threatened with expulsion. A lot of this was stemming from being in a chaotic family environment. He requested counseling to address these issues. However, his mother had a history of severe mental health issues, and she would not consent. Repeatedly, they had tried over the years. So again, our hands were tied in providing this support.
Thank you. If you could please conclude your testimony.
Okay. Schools and mental health providers interpret these laws very conservatively for fear of lawsuits. So we don't stretch the boundaries. These kids just don't get the help they need. SB 543 would expand the circumstances that they can consent to their treatment, and as Mr. Leno said, with mental health professionals' advice.
Thank you. Are there witnesses in support?
Brian Lundgren on behalf of families and those who have gone through this with children and other relatives and strong support. We need this for our children and for families going through it. I want to thank the Senator for this legislation.
Thank you for your testimony. Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition to this measure? Seeing none, are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to ask sort of where is the line when a student is on campus and goes to a school counselor and talks about shares with a counselor a problem that's bothering them, and may have several visits to a school counselor with problems that are bothering them. And at what point, or is there a point where it is the counselor's responsibility then to refer that particular student for more professional help? And so I'm just trying to understand where the lines are in terms of, what are the counselor's responsibilities,
Sure.
and how far can a counselor go before he or she needs to then refer
Yes.
a student?
It's a very thoughtful question. I'll let my witness correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is that if that counselor identifies a need for drug or alcohol abuse counseling, professional assistance, if that school counselor realizes that this student is in need of some treatment for a communicable disease or may need reproductive health services, that counselor could legally direct that student to a professional. But if it's outside of those parameters, I don't believe that the counselor could.
I will correct you just slightly. It's true the distinction in terms of drug and alcohol counseling may not require parental permission. School counselors typically are not trained in mental health counseling, and they typically don't provide very much support on the mental health level. Most school counselors are very academic in their focus, and so they may refer, if there is a school counselor that has mental health training, they may refer to that person at the school or in the community. But again, parental consent, except in the circumstances that Mr. Leno described, is still required. So students may not get the counseling they need.
But counselors do have, I hear what you're saying, but counselors do have an obligation by virtue of being a school counselor. Actually, probably any teacher or adult on campus has an obligation. If a student comes to them with an issue that is life-threatening of any sort, or not even life-threatening, but we have serious impacts on students, it is their obligation, is it not, to then refer that particular student, notify the family, etc.?
It is their obligation when there are extreme circumstances. But it doesn't always happen.
I'm very supportive of the bill, don't get me wrong. I just wanted to sort of understand where the lines of responsibilities are, and I don't want a law like this to take place and then not really, I want the engagement of as many adults on campus engaged with students as possible, and I don't want this law to interfere in just the overall, on the natural engagement that adults would have with students, because I think that that's a very important component, that students would just go directly to a mental health provider for a particular case, which I think is a good thing, but I don't want that to interfere with other interactions.
Yeah, and if I could just say one thing, they usually go to teachers first. That's the people they're most familiar with. And then it's just a question of whether that counselor can see them, because the teachers don't often have time or the training to deal with the heavier issues.
And we also know California ranks 50th among states in per student ratio.
Yes, I understand that too.
Nurses and
yes.
librarians.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. Other members of the committee with questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Leno, would you like to close?
Just a very brief close. I want to again thank Kyle for coming. This is the second time he's come to testify, and you get better each time you do it. Thank you. It's a good experience for you when you make your first run for public office. And to also explain to the committee that it's not just for LGBT youth that we're concerned about. We might be talking about a student who comes from a family where English is not spoken at home, from a culture that doesn't recognize or value mental health services. They may be fearful to give consent. They don't know what they're getting into and just refuse to give it. It could be a student who's coming from a home where there is, if not physical or sexual abuse, some sort of psychological abuse going on, and really can't get through that with the parent. Now, I don't want to understate the very great importance of parental involvement. That is not what this bill is about whatsoever, but we are talking about finding that right balance. And so the bill does say that the licensed professional is required to get parental consent if that professional believes that the youth is not capable of making this decision on his or her own. And if you put yourself in the position of that professional, mental health provider, my guess is, and I place a significant bet, that that counselor is going to err on the side of caution, and if there's any question whatsoever, contact the parents, because there would be obvious liability concerns that that professional would not want to risk. But I think we've struck a good balance here in recognition and support for parental involvement and consent, but recognizing there are circumstances that can literally be life-threatening where we want to have the contents of this bill in place in law.
Thank you,
I'd ask for
Senator
your
Leno.
vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran?
No.
Tran, no. Brownlee? Aye. Brownlee, aye. Evans? Aye. Evans, aye. Jones? Knight? No. Knight, no. Krikorian? Liu? Aye. Liu, aye. Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva?
No, based on years in the school council.
Silva, no.
Thank you very much. That bill has 5 votes, requires 1 more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members.
Thank you, Senator Leonard. All right, so our next senator who is here is Senator Lowenthal. Welcome, Senator Lowenthal, who is here on item 3, SB 183. Senator Lowenthal, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. SB 183 has to do with carbon monoxide alarms. Carbon monoxide is the leading cause of accidental poisoning. and deaths, accidental poisoning deaths in the United States. Unfortunately, the initial symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning are the same as flu symptoms, and therefore it's frequently, maybe not usually, but it's frequently misdiagnosed and not treated accordingly. The Air Resources Board estimates that every year in California, carbon monoxide poisoning accounts for between 30 and 40 deaths and somewhere up to 700 emergency room visits and probably thousands of illnesses a year. What SB 183 does is it simply requires all existing family homes to have a carbon monoxide detector installed by January 1, 2011. For all other existing dwelling units, including apartments, the compliance date is July 1, 2012. A minimum of 23 other states now have very similar legislation. There is bipartisan support for this measure. There is no opposition to the measure, and I ask for your aye vote, and I have here witnesses in support.
Thank you, Senator Lowenthal. First witness in support.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Barankin. I represent the California Coalition for Children's Safety and Health and the California Industrial Hygiene Council. And together with the firefighters are sponsoring this bill. And as you can imagine, there have been some very tragic stories about individuals and families who have lost their lives as a result of a very innocent leak in their furnace. And so this is a good piece of legislation that will save lives.
Thank you. Others in support?
Christine Minahan on behalf of Western Center on Law and Poverty. SB 183 is a particular benefit to low-income tenants who tend to live in the rentals that have older, faulty, often not well-maintained appliances, and we urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Others in support?
Yes, my name is Afrak Vargas. I'm with the California State Firefighters Association. We're co-sponsors of this bill and proud to be working with our former legislator of the year, Senator Lowenthal. Carbon monoxide is also very dangerous to the folks that are the first responders, police and fire, and for that reason we support.
Very good. Thank you very much, and Senator Lowenthal thanks you for the free advertising. Are there others here in support?
I didn't hear that.
Oh, yeah. No, just a request to have him say it again, right? Others in support? Anyone who is in opposition? All right. Seeing none. Committee members, questions or comments for the senator? Seeing none, is there, well, the senator wants to close?
There's now, carbon monoxide detectors are now reliable. There's a number of them that are on the market now, and that's why there is no longer any opposition. And this is a reasonable bill, meets the governor. This bill had come up before. As you recall, last year, the governor said, I like the bill, but you should not be imposing this on new construction by legislation. Let that go through the Building Standards Commission. We are doing that. So we've met the governor's objections, and I ask you for your aye vote.
Thank you. Actually, having done research myself and with a couple of these in our house, it's actually very critical to have these for the safety of kids, as well as adults, of course. All right. Been moved? Moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? Tran, no. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, no. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Monning, aye. Silva? Is that no? Silva, no? Silva, no.
Okay. That bill has 4 votes, requires 2 more. Thank you very much, Senator Lowenthal.
Thank you.
All right. So our next senator here is Senator Cogdill.
No, I'll take that. Thank you.
Senator Cogdill is here on item number 7, SB 348. Welcome, Senator Cogdill. Nice to have you here.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Please.
Before presenting the bill, I'd like to note that I will be accepting the amendments that have been suggested on page 7 of the analysis.
Thank you.
For the record. In February, as part of the budget deal, the legislature approved SB 10XX, which authorized rental car companies to pass through the cost of the VLF increase by adding it as a separate line item on a customer's bill. While the legislature intended for rental car companies to have the ability to make this pass-through, the language in SB 10XX included requirements that made it nearly impossible for them to do so. SB 348 alters these requirements in a manner that is consistent with the agreement made by leadership, while also ensuring that customers are protected and not overcharged. Specifically, the bill allows rental car companies to calculate the pass-through based on the amount paid per class of vehicle rather than for each individual vehicle. The bill received unanimous support in the Senate, and I requestfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Cogdill. I just wanted to clarify, I believe you indicated that you were taking amendments on page 7 of the analysis. It's actually page 5, just so for the record, I want to be sure people are cognizant of what they're,
thank you,
how the bill's being amended. Your first witness in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Fred Tour, representing the Hertz Corporation and the Avis Budget Group. We are in support of this bill, and as Senator Cogdill mentioned, the essential difference between this bill, the provisions of this bill, and existing law that was enacted in February is that with this bill, which has sort of restructured the formula for calculation of the pass-through amount, we can comply with pre-existing consumer disclosure requirements. Under the way it was drafted in February, we could not. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
I'm Kathy Turner on behalf of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Alamo, and National Rental-Car, and would just respectfully ask for your aye vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support? Are the witnesses here in opposition to the measure? Seeing none, committee members, questions or comments for the senator? Senator Trent, pardon me, Senator Member Trent. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's going to be a long. Don't jinx it, please. Senator, I wondered if there's going to be a reduction in the VLF rate, will there also be a reflection of a reduction in the cost as well? Subsequently,
I'm sure there will
since
be.
It's been
since
going
it's
up
a direct
and down.
pass-through.
It directly relates to the increase only, and so if the VLF reduces back down to the 0.65, there will be no more pass-through.
Okay, how about a different rate?
If it would go up?
Reduction.
A reduction. Yeah, it relates to what we pay. We are not allowed to recover more than what we pay.
Got it. Okay, very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, Senator Cogdill, do you wish to close?
Ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran?
Aye.
Tran, aye. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, aye. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Monning, aye. Silva? Silva, aye.
Congratulations, Senator. That bill is out.
Thank you very much.
Next senator here is Senator Alquist, who is here on item number 6, SB 303. Senator Alquist, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you.
Please.
SB 303 would codify and strengthen existing regulations protecting a nursing home resident's right to give informed consent prior to the administration of psychotherapeutic medications. Thank you, Senator Fuhrer and committee staff, for working with me to address stakeholders' concerns over what happens if a nursing home resident or the resident's representative did not agree or cannot recall agreeing to treatment with a psychotherapeutic medication. On that point, I will take the First Amendment in Section 5, Subdivision D, clarifying that facility staff shall promptly refer the resident or the resident's representative who has questions or concerns about the proposed treatment to the prescribing physician. On the Second Amendment, I am committed and will continue to work with you and your staff and stakeholders, including the department, to draft language in Subdivision H that helps facilities operationalize or implement the bill's informed consent requirements, and also guides the department to enforce these laws to better protect our nursing home residents. SB 303 should have no cost to the general fund, since nursing homes must already train their staff on informed consent, which was my previous legislation signed into law in the year 2000. Members and Chair, what I'm really trying to do is we see many cases over many years where sometimes nursing homes over-medicate residents with psychotherapeutic medications, and the resident nor the in cases where there's a representative nor the resident's representative has given the informed consent. I had a personal experience with this. My father was in a nursing home in Missouri many years ago, and none of this was explained to him or to my brother who was there. And to make a very long story short, within 3 or 4 months after the medication Haldol was given, my father died. And it was never explained that the medication, the black box warning was never explained, and the same thing is happening here in California. And I think people have the right to die with dignity and not to have these kinds of things happen. So basically what this bill says, because I did this in my previous legislation, but not all nursing homes, maybe 90 or 80% are following the current law, but not the other 10 or 20%. We're saying that the physician needs to explain this, and that the informed consent needs to be in the resident's file, and that it should be done this way. So that's basically what the bill does.
Thank you very much, Senator. I know this is a bill of specific personal importance to you. It's an important bill statewide. And I do want to mention with regard to the amendments that, as you're aware, my staff and I have both been involved in trying to find with your staff and you the appropriate balance here, and I will commit that my staff will continue, as I will, to work on the second of these amendments regarding the enforcement issue as the bill moves forward.
We appreciate that, everything that you have done.
Yes, thank you. So please, first witness in support.
Good morning. I'm Mike Connors of Canner, California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. Canner is a sponsor of SB 303. I'm here to tell you that the problems that Senator Alquist's late father faced some years ago are very common in California nursing homes today. The excessive use of psychoactive drugs is an extraordinarily serious problem. These drugs, although they sometimes have appropriate purposes, are too often being used to sedate and restrain nursing home residents as a substitute for care that they need. The numbers are really shocking. In California today, 1 in 4 nursing home residents are being given an antipsychotic drug. That's about 25,000 people. These drugs, the FDA has issued black box warnings for a black box warning, meaning that the FDA has made findings that these drugs are very likely to increase the risk of death, especially for elders with dementia. And there's no question that these drugs are costing lives. For example, an FDA physician testified before Congress that as many as 15,000 nursing home residents may be losing their lives every year because of misuse of antipsychotic drugs. Closer to home, Attorney General Jerry Brown brought criminal charges against a Kern Valley County nurse, doctor, and pharmacist involving a nursing home there that was misusing these drugs that cost the lives of at least 3 residents. So these are very serious issues. Despite the FDA warnings, most nursing home residents and their representatives don't know anything about the risk associated with the drugs because nobody tells them. Many times they would not have given consent if they had known about these risks. SB 303, as Senator Alquist explained, establishes a simple 2-step process to ensure that nursing home residents or their representatives are given the information that they need to make an informed decision. The first step involves the doctor. The doctor is merely asked to ensure that nursing home residents and their representatives are given information about the FDA warnings that are pertinent as a part of advising them about risk associated with the drugs. The second step involves the nursing home, whose staff would simply be required to verify with the resident or representative that they've given consent.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, next witness in support.
Hi, I'm Geneva Carroll. I'm a long-term care ombudsman. I have been a state-certified ombudsman for over 8 years. I work with Ombudsman Services of Northern California. In our 13-county range over the last 8 years, I've been in hundreds of facilities, hundreds of times. And there's nothing more sad than going into a facility and seeing residents lined up, slumped over, drooling on themselves because they've been drugged to be calm. Typically what happens in a situation is that a resident will become agitated, and a nurse will decide, who is usually an LVN, will decide that this resident needs to be made calm. So she will call the doctor and ask for Haldol, Ativan, any of these psychotropic drugs, and the doctor will give his consent over the phone, and then they will administer this medication to the resident. They will mark it in the chart with a little sticky note for the doctor to okay when he comes in the next time, in the next week or month or whenever the doctor comes in again. That phone call is made to the resident's family. Sometimes it's a wife who is also elderly, or a husband who's elderly, or a family member. Sometimes this is even in the middle of the night, and told that your resident, your loved one, has become agitated. The doctor has prescribed a medication, and he's calm now. And that's what happens. I'm reminded of a situation where I had a resident in a facility who was very violent. He was chemically restrained as well as physically restrained, and even had to wear a helmet. And I was even afraid to get too close to him because I didn't want him to hit me, because he hit other residents and things like that. And after a year or two, he disappeared. I asked where he went, and the facility said he's not here anymore. Amazingly, about 3 months later, I was in a different facility, and I came across the same resident. He was not restrained chemically, physically. He didn't wear a helmet, and he could actually speak to me. He has a degenerative brain disease, so he couldn't speak super clear. But I have really enjoyed getting to know this man over the last 6 or 8 months that he's in this other facility. It's truly amazing, and I feel really sorry for him that he had to go through years of that torture. I ask, please, for your yes vote on this.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in support.
I'm Senior Assembly Member Lola Young on behalf of the California Senior Legislature, and we are strongly in support of this measure.
Thank you. Others in support?
Paula Lee on behalf of AARP in support.
Other witnesses in support? Are the witnesses here in opposition?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Dave Helmsen on behalf of the California Association of Health Facilities. We represent the majority of the health facilities, nursing homes in the state, and we do admissions of about 225,000 individuals every year. We're concerned about this bill not because of the policy. In fact, nursing homes are more than happy to do their part to make sure that folks receiving these drugs get the right type of information and have an opportunity for informed consent. Our issue, our angst over the bill really deals with one simple provision which we think puts the nurses in our nursing homes. We are nursing homes, not physicians. We don't prescribe. We don't, by law, get informed consent. That's a physician responsibility. And yet a step in this bill requires the facility to essentially invalidate the physician's orders and the informed consent based on a conversation with a patient. We're very nervous about the position that puts the facility in. We're withholding treatment in direct violation of a physician order, and that piece of the bill is very troublesome to us. We appreciate the recent discussions and the involvement of the committee in trying to work through that area, and believe that the senator is well intended in her effort to try to make this work, but we're going to remain opposed until that provision of the bill is straightened out, so everybody's on the same page in terms of who's liable for care and what the repercussions are when we actually invalidate a physician's order.
And just for clarification, it's that provision to which the senator referred earlier when she committed to continuing to work with the stakeholders to find the right outcome.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Next witness in opposition.
Thank you. My name is Mark Reagan. I'm a health attorney. I've been practicing 20 years. Our firm specializes in the representation of doctors, acute care hospitals, long-term care facilities. The legal doctrine of informed consent is something that has existed for more than 25 years, and healthcare institutions are not part of that process. It is up to a physician to obtain informed consent. The existing state of the law is that current regulations require a nursing staff to review the record to validate that the doctor has made a notation in the record that there has been an informed consent. By seeking to have a nurse at a healthcare institution ask whether or not the patient has actually agreed reopens informed consent, and it creates the risk where now if the patient says anything other than an unequivocal yes, that they have voluntarily agreed to the particular treatment, The nurse is in the place, and therefore the long-term care facility is in the place where it has to decide, well, does this mean that the informed consent is invalid? Does it mean that the valid physician's order is invalid? And what do I do now? Do we withhold treatment? And what are the ramifications of having treatment withheld in that instance? And so it creates sort of a reopening of the informed consent process that is really unprecedented in the area of the law of healthcare institutions. Knowing the staffs of long-term care facilities, this is going to require some serious training about how to navigate answers that are anything other than an unequivocal yes. The law of informed consent precludes nurses from actually discussing the elements of informed consent and what the underlying risks or benefits of the particular procedure or treatment is. There would almost have to be a hands-off, try to find the doctor, and try to get the doctor to come back and to give a valid informed consent, and then where the long-term care facility is left is what do you do in the meantime?
Thank you very much for your testimony. Others in opposition?
Barbara Glazer with the California Hospital Association. We too are opposed to the bill for the very same reasons that the health facilities are opposed. Our hospitals operate about 120 skilled nursing facilities that are part of the hospital, so we have the very same concerns.
Thank you. Other witnesses in opposition to the measure? Seeing none, committee members, questions or comments? Mr. Jones and Mr. Monning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to just make sure there were some technical amendments in the Health Committee that we deferred being taken till this committee. I may have missed it, but I didn't hear an indication that those amendments will be taken in this committee.
Senator?
I think we have taken them.
Yes, absolutely. They've been taking those.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're in the. There's a mock-up here, I guess. So those amendments are in the mock-up then?
Yes.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification because it was an important question, and I'm glad you asked.
And they are referenced in the analysis. I just wasn't sure because I haven't had a chance to read the entirety of the mock-up. Then,
right. They have been taken. There's only one outstanding issue which we addressed early on that we are working on.
Okay. And then on that issue, I mean, we had a very extensive discussion of the bill in the Health Committee, and I really appreciate the Senator bringing the bill forward. It's an important issue. The legal issue that's been raised is a new issue which wasn't raised in the Health Committee, and I'm very appreciative of the Senator working with the chair and the opposition on that issue because I think there's a legitimate concern about liability associated with essentially saying, well, since voluntary consent wasn't given, then we're not going to provide this treatment, and then that puts the facilities in an interesting position. So I really appreciate the Senator's leadership on this.
Thank you, Assemblyman Jones. What it really means is that if the given informed consent is in question, then yes, the facility needs to go back to the doctor to have that clarified. And during that period of time, during the clarification period of time, that psychotherapeutic medication is not given till that is clarified. And I think all residents deserve that much.
Right. No, I think that's very true and the heart of your bill and why I supported it as the chair of the Health Committee. I think, though, the new and related issue, though, is in that circumstance, what liability does the facility potentially have if they now decide, based on that they're not going to follow what they thought was the doctor's requirement? And I don't propose to have that debated out here, but I appreciate your willingness to work with the chair and the opposition on that issue, because I think that is a legitimate issue which may have to be addressed more explicitly. But thank you very much.
I'm happy to work on that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank the Senator for bringing this to our attention. It raises some significant issues, and I think the amendments reflect some work on that. I do have some questions, and maybe you or your witnesses could help walk me through how this works. I'm looking at this amendment language, the bold language, and the second sentence in there suggests that if a resident or their representative has questions or concerns, that the facility staff shall refer these questions and concerns to the resident's attending or prescribing physician and surgeon. I follow that. The first sentence is the one that you could perhaps walk me through. If somebody's suffering, for example, from dementia and is in a facility and is asked by a staff person whether they received information from their treating physician about potential risks, did they give informed consent, and they're not compos mentis to remember whether or not that happened, and they say no, and then the staff is empowered to take away the medication, as I read this, without consulting the physician, and potentially somebody who's dependent on certain drug therapies. If you just cold turkey take them off, couldn't there be a medical consequence that staff person should not be exercising what is really within the domain of a treating physician, a prescribing physician? So if you could just help me understand how that would work.
To explain that.
Yeah, it's a good question. The situation that you described is common in nursing homes. They're not taking away a medication, though. This happens at the point where a medication is first being prescribed. So it doesn't amount to a taking away of medication. In the case of folks with dementia, which is the population generally that is being subjected to these drugs, oftentimes they don't have capacity. They're not able to make decisions for themselves. And these decisions are made by their representatives. And these conversations between the facility are made with those representatives, not the residents. So the issue about forgetting and not knowing or being confused, again, those conversations won't have been with a resident who doesn't have capacity in the first place. The law and regulations allow those decisions to be made by somebody who's either a legal representative or a next of kin of the resident, and those people aren't going to be subjected to the confusions related to dementia.
I appreciate that, but in this sequence, so you've helped clarify for me that it's not an ongoing administration of medication, but it would be a new prescription. Is it still within the power of the staff person, if they conclude that there wasn't informed consent, that they can not fulfill that prescription without talking to the treating physician?
Right. The language that's subject to there's been some agreement, I understand, in terms of language that was suggested by the opponents, would direct those issues. The facility staff would be directing those issues back to the physician to address, whether it's a clarification or a refusal of treatment or whatever. It's the physician's job to address that.
Thank you. So just maybe somebody from staff can help clarify. Does the amendment language then, before there is an implementation by staff not to fulfill a prescription, that there would have to be some consultation with the treating physician?
Okay. The amendment language does make clear that if the resident raises a question and the nurse or the person who has asked the resident or the resident's representative if they had any questions and there was any issue about informed consent, they would direct those questions to the prescribing or attending physician. Yes.
Mr. Mung, just to be clear, in the meantime, and this is sort of where Mr. Jones' question was going and where Mr. Helmsen was going earlier, if there are questions pending and the physician is not available to be consulted with to clarify the answers, there is a period of time in which the medication would not be administered. That is the intent of the author, and that is explicitly stated in the amendment. Mr. Jones then asks, well, let's be clear about this. Are there, in fact, potential liability issues associated with that provision in the event that the home withholds the medication to the potential detriment of the resident in the long term? Answer, there are some potential issues, and those are the issues to which I and others have referred that need to be continued to be worked out, because I think there is an answer to that question to be had. It's an important question. It is not yet solved as the bill is here before us today.
And just while I still have the mic, I appreciate those clarifications. I'm supportive of the objectives, and I will be voting in support of your measure with the understanding that these issues are continuing to be refined.
You have my commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Money. Ms. Brownlee.
Yes, I know that some of these issues that are raised are difficult issues, but I just want to applaud you for bringing this bill forward. I think it's a really important bill, and I understand that there are always these exceptions to the rule, but this bill will protect a large group of people who are in nursing homes who don't need to be need to have these medications and can have a quality of life. And I think over time, this bill hopefully will take place before any medication is distributed. And so some of these potential problems that are raised will eventually go away because this protection will be there at the very beginning of the process as opposed to having the process have already occurred and have to withdraw from it. So I just want to thank you. I know we're talking about correcting some of the smaller nuanced pieces here that need to be worked out to find that balance, but overall I just want to thank you for bringing, I think, an important measure forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. Other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, Senator, do you wish to conclude?
Ask for your support.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion on the bill? We moved as amended. Okay, please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran?
No.
Tran, no. Brownlee? Aye. Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Aye. Jones, aye. Knight? No. Knight, no. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva? No. Silva, no.
The bill has 4 votes. It requires 2 more, Senator. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so our next senator who is here is Senator Woke. Senator, welcome. Senator Woke is here on item number 10, SB 459. This is bill with support on both sides. Senator Woke, good morning.
I ask you for your aye vote. No, depends how tired you are. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. We're handing out pictures of the problem 459 is trying to address. This is about abandoned watercraft on state waterways. This is not only a problem of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, where many of the pictures that you will see occur, but it is a problem statewide. There are an increasing number of boat owners who store their vessels on state lands without permission and who dump or abandon their old or unseaworthy vessels on state lands. The vessels often pollute the water, present great safety issues, and frankly are an eyesore. This bill had bipartisan support, and we're looking to the current State Lands Commission, which has authority to remove and dispose of the vessels on state lands, but the process is extremely cumbersome. It requires the Commission to file lawsuits through the AG's office. This bill would streamline the lengthy and expensive judicial process and allow the Commission to decide the final disposition of abandoned and trespassing vessels through an administrative process. The process includes safeguards, noticing, public hearing requirements, and an extra 30-day waiting period. This bill is sponsored by State Lands, supported by the boaters. There is no opposition. I ask for your aye vote, and Mario DiBernardo is here from the State Lands Commission to answer any questions. And I just encourage you to look at the pictures. Why people do this, I don't know, but it's really a mess.
Thank you, Senator Woke. Your witnesses, please.
Mario DiBernardo from the State Lands Commission, conveying the Commission's strong support and sponsorship of this bill. Senator Wolk basically summed up most of my points. I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Others in support? Are there witnesses in opposition? Seeing none. Mr. Jones.
I want to thank the Senator for her leadership on this. This is a big problem along the border of my district and Ms. Yamada's district.
Correct.
And I think your district as well is bordered on the Sacramento River with
Indeed.
Senator Steinberg. But we've got all these abandoned vessels in the Sacramento River, and the owners or operators just walk away from them. They're a hazard. They're an eyesore. They pose all sorts of dangers, and I would love to be a co-author of your bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, Senator, wish to conclude?
I ask for your aye vote, and thank you to the chair and to the staff for their excellent analysis.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion? It's been moved. It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran?
Aye.
Tran, aye. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, I. Krikorian. Liu. Monning.
Aye.
Monning, I. Silva. Silva, I.
Congratulations, Senator. That bill is out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next senator by sign-in order is Senator Liu, who is here on item number 14, SB 629. Senator Liu, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. SB 629 limits the payment a project owner can retain from a prime contractor and what that contractor can withhold from subcontractors down the line to 5% of the contracted amount. It also requires retention proceeds to be paid to the contractor or subcontractor within 45 days of his or her work being completed. After negotiating with California Building Industry Association, I have amended the bill to provide that the project owner or contractor can require a bond, delete the escrow account requirement, and make other clarifying technical amendments. And with these amendments, the CBIA has removed its opposition. 40 states, including California, limit retention for public sector projects. California limits Caltrans to zero retention on transportation projects. The federal government allows zero retention on projects it funds. 10 states limit retention in the private sector. Some general contractors argue that retention is necessary to protect them from non-performance. However, their ability to withhold 150% of disputed amounts and to negotiate bonding as part of the subcontracting process, plus good project management, gives them the protection they need. SB 629 especially aims to help small subcontractors who now more than ever in these difficult economic times operate on slim margins, usually less than 5%. General contractors typically retain 10% of monies owed the subcontractors until the entire project is complete. So a subcontractor who satisfactorily completes work early on, such as grading, must wait to be paid, sometimes up to 3 years. These days, they are even more at risk with some major projects being abandoned in midstream. Small businesses need to be paid promptly in order to pay their employees and suppliers, stay solvent, and seek new work. Circulating this money promptly back into the economy will stimulate the productivity and jobs. This bill passed the Senate 31-6 with strong bipartisan votes, and I ask for your vote today.
Thank you very much, Senator Liu. Your witnesses, please. First witness in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Liu. As the author of the bill concluded the remarks, this bill really is about jobs. It's about cash flow, especially in this economy. What has been the custom of holding out 10% or more, called retentions, from the owner to the general contractor and from the general contractor to the various subcontractors, has now worked its way into an untenable economic situation. I mean, do any of us really go to the grocery store and buy all the groceries for the week and pay the grocer 90% and come back and pay the remaining 10% after the food has been eaten and it was good? It doesn't work in the real economy. I think opponents might suggest that this intrudes on the free enterprise marketplace of negotiations between owner and general and subs. I can submit to you, pursuant to the client's information to me, this is the way that works. Contract's on the table, put across to the sub, you want the job, sign the contract. 10% is onerous, usurious, and in fact is almost 5 times the amount of the subcontractor's profit. Asking a subcontractor in today's economy to wait until the entire project is complete is not common sense, nor is it fair. I think the overriding issue of whether or not it's 5% or 10% can be summed up by the fact that other states have certainly gone with 5% or less. Our own, in the public sector, Department of General Services, due to Bob Margette's bill, is 0%. Federal government projects, 0%. Ironically, the Associated General Contractors National Association recommends reduced or limited retentions. It's a matter of economic sense. I think the final point I'd like to make is this. It's been suggested that were this bill to pass, general contractors and project owners would only go to the big boys, to the subcontractors. I would submit The current situation is causing that to happen right now. It's because larger general subcontractors can withstand being paid only 90% of what they've done, completed, and which the general contractor has approved and signed off on. So why are you holding the money? We did the job, we did it right. We'd like to have the payment.
Thank you for your
very
testimony.
much.
Ms. Witness in support.
Yes, John Benton on behalf of CalPass, the specialty contractors. We have a supportive amended provision. We're working with the sponsors and the author on some minor tweaks to the language. They're referenced in the analysis relative to the completion, substantial completion of the scope of work. And so that's the item we're working on with them.
Thank you for your testimony. Are the witnesses in support who haven't testified yet? Witnesses are you in support or opposition? Neither. Witnesses who are ambivalent.
Strongly ambivalent.
Yeah.
Good morning, Nick Camerata on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. I just wanted to confirm also what Senator Liu just mentioned, and I want to thank her for working with us. We have removed our opposition, and I wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that nebulous testimony. So, witnesses in opposition to the measure.
Mr. Chair, members, Scott Governor, on behalf of the Construction Employers Association, in opposition to the bill, a couple of points. I think in the analysis there's a discussion about being close to reaching resolution with the author. That is incorrect. There are discussions of amendments going on. We have not seen any language. More importantly, this bill goes beyond retention and dictating private contracts. Now we are fundamentally changing how payment is distributed in construction projects, because the current practice is 45 days upon completion of the project. That's important because if there's a problem along the way or down the road, we still have retention on the subcontractor so we can get them back to work. If we don't have any of their money left, they will not come back. It's a simple thing. Unless you have some leverage, they will be gone. You know, previously the author talked about conforming this to the law pertaining to public contracts. Well, public contracts, including SB 802 and AB 396, both maintained the 45 days upon completion language. This amendment was sprung upon us, and it fundamentally changes how people are paid. This isn't about big and little. This is about ensuring that everyone in the project remains solvent, and that's what retention helps, because when the subcontractors default, which is becoming a more and more common occurrence, contractors need some money there to soften the blow. Otherwise, they themselves will default. And this isn't just about big developers and big contractors. This goes all the way down to the smallest developers, tenant improvements, anything. It applies across the board. So for these reasons, we are opposed.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, members, Paul Gladfelter representing the Associated General Contractors. Not to repeat Mr. Governor's comments, although we concur with them. We see this as a area that's been traditional between contractors and subcontractors. We believe that flexibility should be retained in this area, dealing with retentions for the reasons that Mr. Governor mentioned, and for that, we oppose the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, Senator, do you wish to respond to the opposition before the committee has questions?
Just for one reason, we did not. 45 days is already current law, and we did not change that law. And all we're doing is trying to respond to the turnaround time. You know, with a subcontractor if he's a grader and he's done his job, sometimes these projects, big projects, takes years, and he'll never get paid for years. And so we're just trying to make sure that payment is due for folks who have performed their job within a reasonable time.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Silva.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I've only been on this committee for a short time, and there's some things that I don't understand. I should have contacted you and asked my questions earlier, but a completion bond, if that's in place for the work that's already been performed, how does that play into this?
If I may, Mr. Silva, in behalf of the sponsor, the bill as amended and before you allows for performance bonds. In other words, we don't do the job, and if we don't come back for whatever reason, the performance bond is an available tool for the general contractor and the project owner to implement to make sure that that work is corrected. What this bill does right now is allows various trades to submit their claim on the work that's been done, finished, approved, and completed in the scope of work, which should be identified in the contract. And in submitting that form, that claim form, that triggers the payment of the final retention. Extending that obligation of the early trades, if you will, to the end of the entire project doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, it borders on getting into the construction defect part of law rather than we've done the work, pay us. The bonds are, it's like belts and suspenders. We have retention held against us, and we also have bonds that are offered in the event we default. What more do they want? We'd just like to pay our employees, buy materials to ironically finish the job, and avoid having to take out a personal loan to keep our employees working.
Could you respond, Mr. Butterfield?
First, respectfully, current law is 45 days of completion of the project. This bill does, in fact, change it to 45 days of completion of the scope of work. So that is a very fundamental change. With respect to the bonds, yes, it would provide coverage to the contractor if the subcontractor is bondable and if the contractor requests the bonds. However, the bond itself would cost the subcontractor 1% to 2%. So it's a mixed bag as to whether or not they'll actually want to do that.
And in fact, if we don't provide the bond, they can hold 10%. So they have a safety shield there, third base.
Mr. Silva? Okay. Mr. Tran.
Very quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I've read the bill, and is there any provision for homeowners to retain the 10% private contract with the contractors? And this is not commercial? This is homeowners?
That's right.
I don't see that. Am I right?
I don't think they would be excluded, Mr. Tran.
Well,
it's not specified for private individual homeowners, no, but I think it's between the owner, the project owner, the general contractor, and the sub. In the event it's you or I doing the building, or we own the project, I would assume that it would apply.
The limit is 5%. I mean, basically,
the homeowner would be limited to 5%. Just to answer your question.
That's my concern, frankly, Mr. Dahm, because basically, based on my experience, is that there are many contractors, and this is not a blanket indictment on any contractors, but many contractors take a lot of work, projects, and contracts at the same time. And in order just to keep afloat financially, and a number of contractors towards the end fail to complete the project, and the homeowner likes to have a little more bite in terms of retaining the equity that's within the contract. Instead of 10% would be more equitable, I would think. I mean, are there any comments or thoughts on that?
No, not in this bill, but here.
From both sides, either sides.
Senator? Senator, do you wish to respond?
I'll respond. Certainly, this bill applies to all construction contracts, and there are inequities, and that's part of the problem with the bill. Once you start getting into all these various issues here, it results in a lot of complications. Homeowners, unlike contractors where maybe they have a relationship with their subcontractors or a contractor that comes in to do work for them, they don't have a relationship with them. They don't have an ongoing relationship with them. So it's really important for homeowners to have that extra retention, because if anybody's done any construction work, and I can say I have done personally, it's difficult to get subcontractors back to the job to finish those punch list items. And they are stretched, and they go to lots of different jobs, and homeowners are the ones who ultimately bear that burden.
Mr. Tran, anything further? Okay. Thank you, Senator. Or was there a further response to Mr. Tran's questions that people wanted to state before we proceed to Ms. Brownlee?
If I may, there is a provision in the bill, Mr. Tran, that allows for areas of dispute, legitimate disputes, where the owner can hold 150% of the amounts due. So there's another fourth base coverage.
That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from members of the committee? Seeing none. Senator, do you wish to close?
I just, this is, I think, an important bill for subcontractors because we need to see the money recirculated into our economy. And this is something that we think is reasonable and workable. And so I just ask for your support on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Is there a motion on the bill? The bill's been moved. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? No. Tran, no. Brownlee? Aye. Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Knight? No. Knight, no. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva?
No.
Silva, no.
Okay. Senator, the bill has 3 votes. It requires 3 more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a second SCR 20.
That's on consent, Senator.
Oh.
And the consent calendar has been approved. And so it's done.
Thank you very much. Well, I do have some young people in the audience who came to support the bill. Can I just have them stand and be recognized? The back.
Very nice to have you with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Liu. Okay, in sign-in order, the next senator is Senator Simidian. Just so the senators are clear, the sign-in order is Mr. Simidian, Ms. Wiggins, Ms. Pavley, and Ms. Keogh in that order. Senator Simidian is here this morning on item number 1, SB 620. Senator, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. Little history on the legislative side. Back in 2002, then Senator Peace and then Assemblymember Simidian, that would be me, authored legislation which required for security breach notification. In simple terms, what that meant was that if somebody had your information in their database and it was lost, stolen, or strayed, they had to tell you. And the reason for that was pretty simple, which was that you couldn't help yourself if you didn't know you were at risk, if you didn't know your information had been compromised. The incident at the time that helped move that legislation along was one at the Teal Data Center where 265,000 state employees had their information compromised, and it was only about a month and a half later that information was shared that told those 265,000 employees that their information had been compromised. Somewhat importantly to my story today, 120 of the individuals who were among the 265,000 people who had their information compromised were members of the California State Assembly and the California State Senate. That created a perhaps more personal and immediate understanding of the importance of this issue, and legislation that I then had pending and subsequently that Senator Peace introduced moved along to the point where it actually became a consent calendar item in the final days of the session, even though earlier during the session it had been quite the source of push and shove. Passed on a unanimous basis, bipartisan support. In 2003, we realized that we had started something, frankly, that was more than we had ever hoped. In 2003, Senator Steve Peace and I were named by Scientific American magazine as among 50 leaders in technology in the world. This amused my staff greatly since they had to help me manage my email account, and we have since seen, in all seriousness, 44 states around the country adopt language that is based on the California law to provide the same protections to consumers throughout the country. And what was interesting about the bill, and the reason it earned industry support, was that it had a very light touch. It didn't tell any industry what it had to do. It simply said there are security notification requirements here, breach notification requirements, and we hope that provides a powerful incentive to you all to improve your security. Not going to tell you what to do, not going to impose any costs, there are no burdens, but if and when you come up short, you got to tell people. The net result of that has been beneficial in 2 important ways. First, security has been improved dramatically, and we know that from industry sources who tell us what they have been doing in the aftermath of that law and 44 states around the country. Security has been improved, so there is less likelihood of a breach. We also know, as I said, that consumers are now in a position to defend themselves if and when there is a problem. That being said, it's been 6-7 years now. It's time to take a look at the law and see how we've done. And the answer is that while it is a good law on the books and a powerful law in its simplicity, I would argue, there is one way in which we think we could improve the existing law, and that is by providing more clarity about what the notice of a breach has to provide. Many folks, want to acknowledge this up front, do a great job when they communicate with someone whose data they've lost, do a great job of saying, here's what happened, here's the information you need to protect yourself. But not everyone does, and part of the reason for that is that the law is silent as to what kind of content there should be in the bill so that you can take the steps necessary to protect yourself. And different individuals will take different steps, but they can't make that informed judgment if they don't have that information available. So what the bill does very simply is it says, here's some standard content that is sort of a minimum standard that should be in every such notification. Please put that into the security breach notification when such a notification is required. Has the added benefit from the business side of the equation of assuring businesses that they know what's required of them when the time comes to provide a security breach notification. Because just as consumers are saying to us, you know, we'd like to make sure we get information that's useful to us, businesses are saying we'd like to know what it is we have to send, and we'd like to know that if we send certain information, we've done our job and we're out clean. That's the goal of the bill. It is modest, but it is important. Now, there's a little bit more of a backstory to all of this, which I suspect will come up during the comments and questions. I think what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is hold off on that and say it's modest, it's simple, but it takes an already good bill and makes it better, a bill that has been copied by more than 40 other states around the country, and of which I think California should be justly proud. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much, Senator. Your first witness in support.
Lenny Goldberg, Privacy Rights Clearinghouse. The Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, a nonprofit based in San Diego. We keep a record on our website if people are interested to look at the breaches that have taken place, at least those that are those that have been reported. We've also had a lot of conversations with chief security officers in major corporations who totally acknowledge what Senator Simitian has said, that having these breach notification laws has made a huge difference in information security. That said, we also hear from a lot of aggrieved consumers who are saying, I got this notice, I don't know what it means, I don't know how to respond, and this bill directly responds to the consumer side of breach notification by clarifying when did the breach occur, so we know how, when you start looking at your credit card bills, to know when approximately at least when that happened, so you can look before and after and see what differences there are. How many people were affected? We've gotten calls from people who said, you know, I should never have been in that database. I years ago gave information to UCLA and 400,000 pieces of data were breached. Why was I even included there? I never had anything more to do with them. So it helps establish knowing the number and knowing, and it may be if there are 10 people who are in jeopardy, we will then know that looks like seriously you could be targeted versus millions. But this data lives forever. Once this data is breached, it may be sitting in a computer somewhere in the Ukraine or wherever that may be, where people are, it can spring on you 5 years from now. So it's very important to know this information, when it happened, how much, and where it happened from. Where was my data breached? So we can know that. So it's a very important consumer bill to add to the security that we have set up. So we urge your support.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in support.
Richard Holliver with the Consumer Federation of California. The notices that are currently used have been extremely valuable in bringing to the public light the information that there are many breaches occurring. The problem with the notices is that on the one hand they're very alarming because you're told that your information may have been compromised, but often, I'd say generally, they're also lulling you into a sense of complacency because they say, but we don't think anything wrong has happened. So we're notifying you that something potentially very bad could have happened, but but we don't think anything bad has happened. It would be much more valuable for the consumer to have specific information about the exact nature of that breach, and then that consumer is informed and is then able to take steps to make sure that no compromise has occurred. This bill accomplishes that very important goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Others in support?
Valerie Small Navarro with the American Civil Liberties Union in strong support.
Others in support? Are the witnesses here in opposition?
Hang out.
First witness in opposition, please.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members. Alex Alanis with the California Bankers Association. We actually have a position of oppose unless amended. When Senator Simitian introduced the bill last year in January on the Senate side, I believe it was SB 364, we reached out to his office because we saw an opportunity to actually reach a compromise on this bill. After the bill was vetoed last year, we went back and reached out to his office to say, look, is there an area in which we can actually agree, and if you should move forward with the bill, I think we can probably remove our opposition to the bill. We continue those conversations with his office. The beginning part of this year, when the bill was introduced, offered up a mocked-up version of the bill back in March of this year. I've seen no movement in our direction whatsoever. We're not asking for much, and there's two, and I'll just speak just briefly about the coalition opposition, but I'll speak specifically about one measure. But we're looking for a change in the date provision and also the number of persons affected. With respect to the number of persons affected, we're actually looking for that provision to be removed. A lot of our banks do what's known as a rolling notice, and because the statute requires that once you know or reasonably believe that information has been compromised, you must notify those residents in California that the information may have been acquired by an unauthorized person. So if, say, a hacker has gone into the bank system and we immediately find out 1,000 people have been affected by the breach, we'll send out a letter to those thousands of people. If a couple weeks down the line, found out the actual breach is larger than that, probably 10,000 people, we'll send out the breach to the other people who had been affected by it. If somewhere down the line, and hopefully it's not the case, but maybe a couple weeks later, there was actually 1 million people affected, the other people who did not receive the notice would actually get that notice. So essentially, you can have 3 notices out there about the same breach, one telling you it's 1,000, one telling you it's 10,000, and one telling you that it is 1 million people. You're going to have consumer confusion out there. This information does get leaked to the press, could lead to an inaccurate story being told. We don't think the removal of that is going to hurt the consumer. This bill is asking for about 12 additional requirements new under the statute. And we're talking about things with respect to the description of the breach, which we're fine with, types of information compromised, that it's written in plain language, contact information.
If you could please conclude your testimony.
Okay. So in brief, here it is. 12 new pieces of the letter being included in this bill. We're asking that one be removed and another one be modified. We think that's a very reasonable request to be asked. 91% of what's going to be left in the bill, they would get, as opposed to 100%.
Thank you for your testimony. Next
you.
witness in opposition.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members, Melissa M. Alexin with the California Credit Union League. Very supportive of an enhanced breach notification and worked for the last couple years on this concept. Asking for one amendment and are opposed unless amended. In the case of a retail data breach, the flow of information behind the scenes before that info actually gets to the consumer is pretty complex. As the credit union, as a notifying agency, we have to rely on a third party to give us the information that is required in the breach notification. Usually that third party is a credit card company. Therefore, our amendment that we are seeking is a qualifying amendment that in the case of the description of the general breach incident, that there be a statement that says, if known. Likely, in most cases, the credit union or the financial institution has no idea what kind of breach happened, when it happened, where it happened, how many people were affected, and therefore really are at the mercy of the third-party companies to give us that information. We want to be compliant with SB 20 and therefore are seeking that small clarifying amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Gene Livingston on behalf of State Farm, and our concern is the law of the unintended consequences pertaining to the date and the number of people. We think those bits of information help the hackers and the thieves more than it helps the consumer.
Thank you very much. Others in opposition?
Mr. Chair and members, Joanne Betancourt representing the securities industry, breaking the microphone, and Financial Markets Association, opposed unless amended due to the number of persons affected. Thank you.
Given the budget crisis, we're not going to have capital improvements here in this building, so don't mess with the microphone. Others in opposition?
Valerie Nero for the California Chamber of Commerce, also in opposition for reasons already stated.
Thank you very much. Others in opposition?
Members, Jeff Lowe, Association of California Insurance Companies, also in opposition.
Okay. Are there any other witnesses who wish to speak in opposition to the measure? Seeing none. Questions, comments from members of the committee? Mr. Jones.
First, I want to applaud the author for plunging once again into this area of important consumer notification and consumer protection. Senator Smitty and I actually worked closely together on a broader effort that involved this piece, but as well as a piece that I authored that would have actually set standards for data protection that are based on industry promulgated standards, as well as providing that the source of the breach advise the card issuers as to where precisely the breach occurred, so that consumers then know at what retailer, for example, a breach has occurred, so they can decide whether they want to change their buying habits accordingly. I'm pleased to support this bill because that broader effort, unfortunately, suffered a veto at the hands of the governor, and I think this bill makes an important step forward, albeit it's not as broad as I would like to see, but I appreciate the senator moving forward with this piece, and I do hope that he's successful. The one concern I have, though, is the issue raised by the credit unions about being required to provide information that they may not know. And I think they've asked for an amendment which is reflected in the analysis, and I think it's a reasonable amendment. I think it makes sure that the card issuers are not on the hook for providing information that they don't have, particularly since in this approach we're not requiring the retailers, or the senator is not requiring the retailers to identify precisely where the breach occurred. And so I think the concern is placing credit unions and others on the hook for providing information that they may not have. So I wanted to see if the senator would be willing to take the amendment called out in the analysis. I think it's a reasonable amendment. And again, I think I applaud you, because this has been a I don't know exactly how to describe the labor here, but there's been a lot of work on this, and you're to be commended for picking it up and moving forward with it again.
Thank you, Assemblymember Jones, and through the chair, members. The language that is at issue, as I understand it, is language in the original bill, which has been in place since 2002, and which, to my knowledge, has not caused a problem, in that there is an obligation that folks provide, credit unions in this instance, provide a general description of the breach incident. The credit unions have asked, and we have accommodated, and we've had a very good conversation, have asked for a number of qualifiers along this lines of, please make sure we're not required to provide information we don't have and can't get. And we've always had a little bit of a debate about that language, because on the one side, we obviously don't want to require them to provide information they don't have and can't possibly get. On the other hand, we want to write it carefully enough so that if the information is down the hall in a file cabinet, they can't say, well, we don't have it right here. You get an obligation to go access information that's generally available. The language that's at issue, as I understand it, is on page 3, paragraph E, and it says, and the current requirement, and this is where we have a little debate, is that the credit unions say, well, we want qualifying language, and we think that the language already is qualified, because it says all you have to provide is a general description of the breach incident. That's the language on page 3 at line 7. E, a general description of the breach incident. The word general qualifies it. doesn't say a detailed description. It doesn't say a description which includes this information. It says a general description. That's what the tussle is about. I have asked the sergeant to hand out to you just such a general description, which was issued by Golden One, providing, as you can see at the top, important information about your ATM and check card. This is general information. This is what somebody now does, and they're all different, which is part of the reason we're having this conversation. But this is general information. We think that the bill is already qualified in its language. That being said, Assemblymember Jones and Mr. Chairman, if the chair thinks that it would be helpful and we could move the bill along in better shape by adding the same qualifying language that has recently been added by us at the request of the credit unions, which is if that information is possible to determine at the time the notice is provided, I would be willing to accept that as an author's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
If only so that Mr. Jones and I are not having this conversation with one another years from now.
This is the "we want Mr. Jones should be happy" amendment. Is
well,
that?
No, it's, and kudos back to Mr. Jones. I mean, he's kind. This is a modest measure. Mr. Jones had a much more ambitious measure, which I supported. It was hard work. This is a much more modest effort, and if this one accommodation can, get us to yes, I'm willing to get there, because the goal really is very simple. It's to make sure that when you get a notice, it tells you what you need to know to make a judgment about how to protect yourself. That's all we're trying to do.
I really appreciate, Senator, your willingness to take that as an author's amendment is greatly appreciated. And again, I really thank you for your leadership on this, and I think you're being too modest. This is a very important bill, and you're to be commended for continuing to move it forward and to continue to press for this, and I'm very happy to join you in that effort.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, the one other thing I would say is you're on page 6 of the analysis, your staff points out a very interesting proposed technical amendment which has to do with whether or not the word licensee should be changed to licensor. And this, again, is in the original language of the bill going back to 2002. Let me say, on the one hand, I read it the same way your staff analysis does, so I thought it was a good catch. On the other hand, 33 other states in the country continue to use this particular language, which may mean that they copied off our homework, and if we got it wrong, they got it wrong. So what I'd like to do is not take action on that technical amendment today, consult with legislative counsel on this issue, and if it turns out that their review is consistent with that of your staff analysis, pick that amendment up later, probably at the Appropriations Committee level if the bill moves out of committee here today.
Very well. So just to be clear, as the conversation moves forward from this moment, Mr. Simitian is accepting as an author's amendment the provision about which he and Mr. Jones had the discussion. That is to say, if the information, you want to just repeat that language, Mr. Simitian?
Yes, sir. If you, again, it's probably easiest if we look at page 3 of the bill. At page 3 of the bill, in line 3 of the bill, you will notice that there is, line 7, paragraph E, there is a requirement for a general description of the breach incident. And what I've indicated that I think we can accept and that it responds to the concerns that have been identified by the credit unions and Assemblymember Jones is to use the same qualifying language which you see in italics both above and below, which is if that information is possible to determine at the time the notice is provided. And my capable staff is reminding me that that would also apply to the comparable language on line 6 because the bill is in essentially parallel form.
Yes, thank you. And with regard to the licensee versus licensor language, that is an amendment you would take in appropriation should Leg Council confirm what is our understanding as a committee.
Yes.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for the Senator?
Just one question.
Mr. Tran.
How many breaches that really results in identity theft or illegal activities related to the breach? Do we have a ballpark number? I mean, this is the bottom line issue here.
Well, let me let a witness respond to that, Assemblymember. But let me also say that while that's a significant, perhaps the most significant part of the conversation, I don't think any of us would feel particularly comfortable if our information was compromised, even if it wasn't for identity theft. There are a lot of other bad purposes to which that kind of information can be put. So let me just turn to the witness.
Lenny Goldberg, Privacy Rights Clearinghouse. Identity theft and all kinds of fraud are exploding at an exponential pace. And I think we cannot answer the question. We had a bill with Assemblyman Jones with regard to Social Security numbers in public records. Everybody agreed that Social Security numbers should not be available in public records. Yet the question was always asked, well, how many identity thefts had occurred because of these Social Security numbers in public records? Once this information is out on the wire, it is very, very difficult to know what the immediate source of the fraud or the identity theft, whether it's just simple credit card fraud or identity theft. So the direct relationship is very hard to pin down. On the other hand, we know there's a huge amount of information that's out there that's being gathered that is breached or gathered from public records, and we know that there's an explosion in identity theft and fraud, and those are the only ways we can make those connections.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Mr. Jones.
Just further on that point, I think the Vice Chair raises a very important issue. In one notorious breach alone, which was the TJ Maxx Marshalls breach, there were millions of credit and debit card numbers that were stolen. There were so many debit and credit cards stolen that the issuing banks and credit unions encountered a shortage in plastic cards as they were seeking to reissue the cards. The net result of that breach alone was close to $1 billion in damages, because the damage is not only to individual consumers, but it's the cost of reissuing the cards, and it's the resultant theft that occurs as a result of misusing cards. And so, while it may not be possible to precisely quantify across the whole economy, that one example is an example of how damaging this is and why it's so important we support the Senator's bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Other questions or comments? Mr. Simidian, do you wish to close?
Just because I do want to comment on some things you heard earlier. It is well, 2 points. One, you heard concern about identifying the number of persons, and you also heard concern about this issue of the date, and I want to speak to those by way of the close. As one of the witnesses mentioned, there is at least one reason why it's important to know how many folks were victims of the security breach, and that's to assess some sense of what your level of risk is. One of the beauties of the way this law has worked in operation, Assemblymember, is that it allows every company to take their own security steps, make their own judgments about what they're going to do, and know they'll be held liable if they come up short. But as I said, it's a very light touch in that way. The same token, it also allows every consumer, assuming they're given good information, to make their own judgments. And each of us will make a different judgment. Some of us may say, all right, I'm just going to look at my account a little more carefully. Some of us may say, I'm shutting the account down. That's a judgment each of us gets to make, but we can't make it without good information. One of the pieces of information that is helpful and important is to know how many people were affected. Because if your bank tells you 3 people, you're thinking, you know what, maybe somebody's really looking for me personally, and maybe I'm being targeted. That's very different than the conclusion you might draw if there were 1 million people who were identified. So having that information is important. But it's also important, members, for another reason, which is that too often in the legislature we are justly criticized for legislating without having good data. So one of the things we need to know, both for law enforcement to understand the scope of the problem and where they should devote limited resources, but also as legislators so that we can understand the scope of the problem and use a light and deft touch when we legislate, is to have that information and know how significant the problem is and what kind of numbers we see from what kind of breaches and what kind of industries. That is helpful and important information, big picture, as well as on a consumer-by-consumer level. As to the issue of the date, I don't want you to have a misimpression from the testimony. We have made accommodations on that. Now, first of all, folks, the hackers aren't getting any information. They already know they've hacked. They already know they were successful. They already know what they got. But the question is, when we let you, the consumer, know that there's been a breach, the first question you're going to ask yourself is, well, gee, when did I start to be at risk? When did this happen? Do I look at every one of my bank statements for the last 5 years, or did it happen last summer, and I need to look at everything since that time? In an accommodation to the very request that you heard here today, instead, even though we thought that, frankly, there wasn't a concern there, we said, why don't we try and provide a little bit more flexibility and indicate that instead of requiring the date, we will require the date, estimated date, or date range, so that if folks think there really is some reason to be a little bit fuzzy on that, they can provide a little clarity to us, like last summer or last May, while still not pinning down the date. So I think we've been very responsive on that point, even though, frankly, we don't think the point is well made. That being said, I would respectfully ask for an aye vote. I appreciate the committee's patience on this issue today, and I have appreciated the bipartisan support. Last year, the comparable bill had, I think, a 57 to 19 vote in the state assembly. We've had bipartisan support this year as the successor bill moves through the state senate, and I think that's because privacy is not a partisan issue. It is not an ideological issue. It's an issue that affects each and every one of us, and I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Is there a motion on the bill?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? Tran, no. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, no. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Monning, aye. Silva? Silva, no.
Okay. That bill has 4 votes, Senator. Requires 2 more. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Senator Wiggins, who's been the soul of patience this morning. Thank you for waiting. Senator Wiggins is here on item number 15, SB 635. Senator Wiggins, good morning.
Hi. I have, this is SB 635, and Mr. Chair and members, recent amendments to the bill extend the sunset for Solano County's Family Justice Program until 2011. Current law authorizes certain counties to collect additional fees from marriage licenses and other vital records for the purposes of funding coordination and oversight of domestic violence programs. This bill would extend the authorization to Sonoma County as well. It requires the program to sunset on January 1st, 2015, and domestic violence continues to be a serious problem in Sonoma and Solano counties. So that is why the counties, in collaboration with other community groups and agencies, have agreed to build a family justice center using the additional fees as well as federal and state grants. A family justice center is a single point of access for the delivery of comprehensive services to family violence victims. And I have Christine Cook, Sonoma County Assistant District Attorney, to testify in support of the bill and to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. First witness in support.
Good morning. As the Senator stated, Assistant District Attorney Christine Cook here from Sonoma County on behalf of Sonoma County's District Attorney Stefan Pasalacqua, who's hosting an Elder Summit in our community this morning and regretfully could not be here. I'm also pleased to be here representing a group of stakeholders in our community of over 75 law enforcement agencies, community-based organizations, and service providers in the area of family violence services who've joined together to try to establish and create a family justice center in our community. Our broad coalition recognizes that violence in the home translates to violence in the community. Not only is there a devastating impact on families and children, but the impact to the community extends to juvenile delinquency, truancy, to schools, to the health care field where the costs can be astronomical, involving mental health care and substance abuse costs, to the workplace, to employers' costs. And as we know, domestic violence and family violence is a learned behavior that spans from generation to generation. We're working to create a family justice center to have a single point of access for comprehensive service delivery to victims. Right now in Sonoma County, a victim of domestic violence has to go to 23 different physical locations to resolve her crisis and assist in prosecution. Meet with the detective, the prosecutor, receive a restraining order, receive advocacy, counseling for her children and for herself. In Sonoma County, we're going to change that with the help of a Family Justice Center. In Sonoma County, in 2005 alone, there were over 2,000 calls from family violence assistance to law enforcement, and 697 felony arrests and 1,300 cases plus of domestic violence filed. Family Justice Centers has been found by the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women to be the best practice in the field of family violence intervention and prevention services. Alameda County's Family Justice Center has seen in 2 years in operation 25% reduction in the cases they dismiss as it relates to domestic violence cases, and a 20% reduction in the cases that they reject for filing.
Please conclude your testimony.
Okay. We're hoping with our Family Justice Center to hold offenders accountable, to help victims have improved outcomes, and to increase our efficiency. We've received a $300,000 grant from the California Endowment and a commitment of $500,000 from a private donor, and these funds from this regulatory fee will go toward our operational costs.
Thank you very much. Others in support?
Mr. Chairman, Don Peterson, representing the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. Certainly want to second all of the testimony given by Ms. Cook. It is a very important bill for Sonoma County, and the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors asks for your aye vote.
Thank you. Others in support?
Mr. Chairman, other members, Paul Yoder, Shaw Yoder, Antwi here today in support of the bill on behalf of the Solano County Board of Supervisors. The Solano County Board is very, very, very invested in its Family Justice Center, and I appreciate the Chairman's openness to extending the sunset for Solano in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Others in support? Other witnesses in opposition to the measure? Seeing none, questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, Senator, do you wish to close?
I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran?
No.
Tran, no. Brownlee? Aye. Brownlee, aye. Evans? Jones? Aye. Jones, aye. Knight? No. Knight, no. Krikorian? Liu? Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Silva? Silva, no.
The bill has 4 votes, requires 2 more. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
All right, next in sign and order, let's see. Actually, at the moment, we are senatorless. So we have 4 more items before us. 2 senators have been here earlier and left because we had other matters. The order and sign-in would be Senators Pavley and Keogh in that order. Senator Yee has yet to sign in, and Senator Steinberg has a staff member who will be presenting on his behalf. Can we have the sergeants please ask that one of those senators join us?
Would you be willing to lift calls?
Sure. Actually, we have Senator Pavley. Why don't we do this? Yes. Senator Pavley, welcome. As if by magic, Senator Pavley is with us. Perfect.
I just had this feeling.
Yeah, I could. So Senator Pavley is here on item number 18, SB 757. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 57 seeks to ensure that lead, which we all know is highly toxic metal, does not continue to contaminate our drinking water. And what this does is bans both the sale and the installation of lead wheel weights on cars and trucks. Bill had an extensive hearing in environmental safety and toxics. The research shows that lead wheel weights actually do fall off automobiles, and it's an unregulated source of lead pollution in drinking water. In fact, in California alone, it's about 500,000 pounds of lead falling off cars each and every year. They get abraded by the heavy trucks and vehicles that go. They turns into dust, goes down the streams and rivers and the reservoirs. Lead is identified by the U.S. EPA and by the California Department of Public Health as a primary drinking water and groundwater contaminant. There is no controversy on whether lead is a public health problem or not. We know it's been linked to brain damage and neurological problems, behavioral problems, reduced intelligence, and the list goes on and on. But what this bill is modeled after, it was in California earlier this year that Chrysler and 3 leading lead wheel weight manufacturers have agreed to phase out leaded wheel weights as part of a landmark legal settlement approved by the Alameda Superior Court. This bill would simply codify that settlement and level the playing field for the manufacture and installation of lead wheel weights. Penalty is similar to under Prop 65. I have with me some people to answer technical questions that you may have. I know, Mr. Chairman, you heard this bill in the prior committee, so I look forward to any questions members may have.
Thank you very much, Senator.
And here with me today are Angie Miller with the Center for Environmental Health and Lori Chen with the Clean Water Action.
Please, your first witness in support.
Good morning. I'm Lori Chen with Clean Water Action. On behalf of the 60,000 members, we echo the concerns raised by Senator Pavley. We want to point out that the damage that lead does to our bodies, and it bioaccumulates over time, is not reversible. Once the damage is done, there's no medical treatment to reverse the changes in your nervous system, the changes to your kidneys, the changes to your cardiovascular system. We see this as a common sense bill that will prevent a problem. Just yesterday, I walked into my local tire shop that I go to every year or so and asked them for some samples. They said, "Is lead okay?" So they handed me some samples. It's readily used, and it readily becomes dust as well as a part of our water supply. Currently, many areas of our state are greatly impacted. In the state, it's the Central Valley and Los Angeles that have very high annual rates of lead poisoning identified in children, and there's currently great alternatives. We've had support of Perfect Industries, and they, on their advertising, say that these improvements are better in performance as well as good for the environment. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Others in support?
Hi, my name is Ansha Miller, and I am the Policy Director at Center for Environmental Health. Thank you for this opportunity to support SB 757. The Center for Environmental Health is proud to be a sponsor of this important legislation. I think there might be some confusion about what a lead wheel weight, what a wheel weight actually is. When I first started working on this issue, I thought, what the heck is that? And I think that speaks to actually the need for this legislation and why a market solution isn't going to work for this. The wheel weight balances the tires. When you go to get your tires balanced, that's what they're doing. The wheel weights fall off, and then the tire company has to put these wheel weights back on and adjust them accordingly so that the wheel actually rolls smoothly. I wouldn't know to go in before I started working on this bill and say, actually, I want a lead-free wheel weight. It's just not in the consumer's consciousness. So that's why I think legislation is necessary to really make that happen. My colleague and the senator talked about the extensive health and environmental problems affiliated with lead, and wheel weights causes contributions to that problem. So I'm going to talk more about how we got to this point with the legislation. Currently, steel wheel weights are more expensive than lead wheel weights. And an important reason for this additional cost is that manufacturers have only recently invested in the equipment necessary to make lead wheel weights as opposed to steel or others. But as demand for the steel wheel weights increases, economies of scale mean that this price differential will decrease. But we're not quite at that point yet, which is why we need this law. All major U.S. car manufacturers are currently using alternatives to lead wheel weights in the original vehicles. As a result of an agreement with our organization, the Center for Environmental Health, the two largest wheel weight manufacturers have agreed to end the sale of lead wheel weights in California at the end of 2009.
If you could please conclude your testimony.
Sure. So we had this settlement. This bill codifies that settlement consistent with existing laws, Prop 65, as well as the green chemistry laws, and we strongly urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support? Are the witnesses here in opposition? Seeing none, committee members, questions or comments for Senator Pavley? Seeing none, Senator, do you wish to close?
Certainly. I know the hour is, so I'll just simply ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much.
Reducing lead is an important objective.
Thank you, Senator Pavley. Is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and second, and please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? No. Tran, no. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Evans, aye. Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, no. Krikorian? Krikorian, aye. Liu? Monning? Monning, aye. Silva? Silva, no.
Congratulations, Senator. That bill has 6 votes and is out. Okay, next we have Senator Keogh, another very patient member of the Senate. Thank you very much for waiting. Senator Keogh is here on item number 13, SB 655.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Welcome.
This is SB 555, having to do with conservation easements and condemnation proceedings, members. Conservation easements are currently used in the state of California to protect a wide variety of natural and cultural resources. But there's little or no notice for them in condemnation proceedings when a local jurisdiction is going forward with eminent domain. Nonprofits who hold conservation easements have been reporting that they are overlooked in the condemnation process, and by the time they are aware of what's going on, it's often too late to participate in the process. In addition, public agencies that fund the acquisition of these easements, such as the state through Fish and Game and other agencies, usually have no role or rights in the process. Members, this bill does not inhibit eminent domain or condemnation proceedings by local agencies or any agency, but it simply requires that those entities that hold an easement for habitat or any other purpose would receive notice of eminent domain proceedings. The bill addresses these concerns by including conservation easements as a, quote, property appropriated for public use under eminent domain law. It establishes reasonable notice requirements for an opportunity for the easement holder and public funder to be heard in the process, and it ensures that conservation easement holders are fairly compensated. After all, we've invested in these easements, and oftentimes it's state funds that are paying for them, and to simply have the eminent domain process go forward with no notice is a loss to the taxpayers. It does not expand or change eminent domain proceedings or condemnation proceedings in any way. It simply includes easement holders and public funders in the process. It'll ensure public benefits, financial investments in the easements are protected, and it still allows the proceedings to occur. We have been working diligently with a number of stakeholders and eminent domain lawyers. We do have a couple of remaining issues to work out. As the analysis points out, the East Bay Mud and the Aqua has issues regarding compensation to easement holders in situations where the condemnation does not eliminate the easement, but allows the condemnation agency to maintain its values. We're working with both of them, and we expect to have language that allows easement holders to be compensated to the extent that the condemnation injures the easement. We're just talking about splitting the easement, members, in simple language. We want to resolve this before appropriations, but we're not quite done with the language yet. We'll be happy to work with the committee to keep the staff apprised of our progress. Also, the Transportation Corridor Agency of Orange County has a concern. We have been meeting with them to see if there's a way to work that one out, but we don't have full agreement yet. The bill, members, is sponsored by California Council of Land Trusts. It's supported by the State Parks Foundation, Outdoor Heritage Alliance, the San Diego County Water Authority, and the environmental community. I have with me Darla Gitzler, Executive Director of the Council of Land Trusts, and other witnesses in support, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Senator Keogh. First witness in support, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is
My name is Darla Gensler. I'm the director of the California Council of Land Trust, and we're pleased to be the sponsor of this bill. The Land Trust Association works on behalf of more than 150 land trusts that work in every county to protect the state's natural resources and public health of Californians. In 1979, the state identified conservation easements as a tool that it was in the public interest of the state and would be the public policy to encourage the creation of conservation easements to create natural resources. And what this bill does is, in recognition of the tremendous public investment and those public uses and benefits that easements provide to Californians, is provide early notice to both the easement holder and the public funder in the event that there was public funding, which there is in the majority of easements created in California, or if a public agency required that easement to be created as a condition of approval for mitigation. It also, as Senator Kehoe said, recognizes this public use and ensures that if the easement is eliminated or injured in some way, that easement value is compensated. We are continuing to work very diligently with the stakeholders and have really sought, especially with the help of Metropolitan Water District and the San Diego County Water Authority, to position this bill within the framework of the existing procedures and processes of eminent domain law, because we aren't, as Senator Kehoe said, trying to prevent condemnation, but to recognize the public uses and investments of easements and ensure that easement holders and funders have an early opportunity to comment on the easement and often, or on the proposed condemnation, and often the impacts to the easements can be minimized with early public involvement by putting the easement on the edge of the property and other things that can minimize the loss of the impact to natural resources. So we appreciate your interest in this bill and would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in support.
Jonathan Clay on behalf of the San Diego County Water Authority. We're the water wholesaler to the San Diego region, serving 3 million people. We have a capital facilities plan of about $1 billion coming up in the next year and a half. We have a vested interest in trying to make sure that we're able to still build our public infrastructure projects. In working with Senator Kehoe, her and the sponsors have been very supportive of trying to address our concerns, and we feel that the way the bill is currently amended, it strikes a balance between ensuring that us as local agencies trying to provide public infrastructure have the ability to build that while still balancing the needs for the protections for these conservation easements. We urge your support for this matter.
Thank you. Others in support?
Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District. Ditto what he said. Thank you.
Others in support?
Tracy Vardo Torres with the California State Parks Foundation in support.
Others in support?
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Mark Henley with the California Outdoor Heritage Alliance. This bill would better enable us to protect our duck clubs and other hunting areas that are protected with conservation easements. Many of those contain valuable wetland habitat, so we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pete Price, California League of Conservation Voters, in support.
Others in support? Are the witnesses in opposition? Welcome. Please.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Rick Freese. I'm an eminent domain attorney with Nosman LLP, representing the Orange County Transportation Authority's toll road builders, public toll roads in Orange County. We have been working with the author and with the sponsors, and some of the amendments to the bill have helped, but at this point we're still in opposition pending some additional amendments. The concept, the primary concept of Senate Bill 555, notice, an opportunity for conservation easement holders to be at the table. We don't have any opposition to that. The concept of them getting fair value for the conservation easements, no opposition to that. The problem is with another part of 555, and that's that it elevates these private easements that are unregulated. They don't go through a public vetting process. It elevates those to the level of public use, which gives them special standing in condemnation. And as the bill is currently proposed, it elevates those that have the slightest public handle, $1 of public funding or a tie-in to a public approval, to the level of a public use owned by a public agency. That means that when a road, a school, a park needs to condemn, the conservation easement holders are going to be able to take this to court to have it determined which is a higher public use. That means for any public project out there that might have a private easement in the way, it's faced with potential delays or having the project stopped with this bill as currently amended. And in the day when we're trying to have smart growth, we need planning, you need some certainty, you need to know what is out there. Conservation easements already have considerable protection under CEQA, and if they were given notice and opportunity to be at the table and fair value, that should be sufficient. So we remain in opposition pending further amendments.
Thank you very much. Next witness in opposition, please.
Mr. Chairman and members, Mark Smith on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies of California. We are also in opposition for many of the reasons previously stated. I'd just like to elaborate on the fact that, there are many different types of conservation easements, some that are entered into through a public process that have public oversight, and some that are entered into between a willing landowner and a nonprofit organization, which has no relationship to a public process and therefore has not made a determination as to the highest public use of that particular piece of property. It is with that concern that we continue to oppose the bill along the same comments previously made. Thank you.
Others in support, in opposition, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Lundgren on behalf of the Orange County Board of Supervisors, we respectfully oppose this bill.
Thank you. Other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none. Other questions or comments from members of the committee? Seeing none. Senator, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would just say we are protecting, not even protecting members. This bill provides notice to easement holders that an eminent domain or condemnation proceeding is going forward. It is, just a fundamental right to know what's going on. These are taxpayer-funded easements in many cases, and I actually don't have a good understanding of what a private easement is. I mean, these concerns are, I need to get a better understanding of what the opponents are saying, because in most cases we have true nonprofits, but we have river parks, wildlife corridors, et cetera. There's usually a public element involved, and we think the bill just puts things in the right order, that the easement holder would get notice. Ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Having spent a lot of time myself working on conservation easements, this is a very important piece of legislation. The bill is before us with the understanding that the Senator intends to continue to work on the compensation issue that we discussed earlier. Having said that, is there a motion to approve? It's been moved. Is there a second? Moved in second. Please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? Tran, no. Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Evans, aye. Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, no. Krikorian? Krikorian, aye. Liu? Monning? Monning, aye. Silva? Silva, no.
That has 6 votes and is out. Congratulations,
Thank you
Senator.
very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
All right. Now, I've been apprised. Let's move next in silent order. We have Senator Yee before us. Senator Yee is here on item number 5, SB 242. I've been apprised by the Speaker that we must conclude at noon and not a moment later, and so we'll get as much business in as we can by that hour and then make an accommodation for the balance of our business should there be any. Senator Yee, item 242.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. First, let me thank your staff, Mr. Baker, for his yeoman's work on this particular effort. Before you is a mock-up proposed amendments that we have been developing over the course of several months with both sides of this particular discussion. And again, this is a really important issue. You would think that a lot of the civil rights issues would have been taken care of, but I think there are always rooms for improvement. In 2008, the LPGA said to its players that you have to speak English if you want to play in that particular tournament. What was rather outrageous was that the reason for that was that, well, we need to make sure that our players can talk to the sponsors and socialize with them and Last time I checked, it seemed that it was more your golfing skill than your socialization skills that were important in participating in these kinds of tournament. But nevertheless, that's what the policy was, and fortunately, the LPGA relented on that particular policy. So what this bill will do is to codify the action of the LPGA. What this will do is to make it a violation of the Unruh Civil Rights Act to adopt or enforce a policy that restrict, limits, or prohibit the use of any language in a business establishment unless that language is justified as a business necessity and notification has been provided of the language restriction. This bill is really more about ensuring that no one is going to be required to use any language, including English, in a particular business. And with that, urge and I vote. And
thank you. Witnesses in support.
Valerie Small-Navarro with the American Civil Liberties Union. We've been informed we need to keep it short, so we're in strong support, and we urge an aye vote.
Next witness in support.
Nicole Wertelman, City and County of San Francisco, in support.
Thank you. Others in support.
Vanessa Kahina on behalf of the California Immigrant Policy Center, in support.
Others in support.
Paloma Perez with the Consumer Attorneys of California, also in support.
Thank you for your testimony. Are the witnesses here in opposition?
Kyla Christofferson here on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce. We are in opposition to this measure. However, we are not opposed to the intent of the bill, and we've had many discussions with the author and his staff and committee staff about addressing what our concerns are, which are the unintended consequences with this bill, and the language being perhaps too vague and broad and exceeding the scope of what the intention is. And so we appreciate the mock-up language that's been proposed. We've saw it today. We're taking a look at it. And we do still have some remaining concerns with the mock-up that is proposed. However, we're willing to continue working on the language and thank the author for the willingness to try to address our concerns.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition.
Kimberly Dellinger, representing the Personal Insurance Federation of California. We actually do not have an official opposed position. We came into this bill a little bit late in the process. We do appreciate the author's office and the committee staff working with us. We have similar concerns to the Chamber. We certainly support the intention of this bill, and we will continue to work with the author on language and ensure we can get there.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in opposition who get to be heard? Seeing none, are there questions or comments?
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from the panel? Seeing none, Senator Yee, wish to close?
Just to indicate that we are willing and will continue to work with the opposition to find some agreement, and we're committed to doing that. Thank you.
All right, and so the motion is to approve the bill as amended. Please call the roll.
Fear?
Aye.
Fear, aye. Tran? Brownlee? Brownlee, aye. Evans? Evans, aye. Jones? Jones, aye. Knight? Knight, no. Krikorian? Krikorian, aye. Liu? Monning? Monning, aye. Silva?
Okay, that bill has 6 votes and is out. Congratulations, Senator Yee. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Lipper is here on behalf of Senator Steinberg. And with I'll tell you what, let's do this. Mr. Lipper, why don't you begin to make a presentation? We have 5 minutes. We're going to lift the calls. We have to accomplish that by noon. We are still missing at least one member for the purpose of lifting the call. How would you feel about beginning to make a presentation? If we can't get through it, we will do it all over again rather than require you to truncate your presentation. Mr. Lipper, on behalf of Senator Steinberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Steinberg is tied up in budget discussions, so he regrets he can't be here.
Item 17, SB 722, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman and members, SB 722 is a truth in advertising bill related to the sale of what are called carbon emission offsets. Carbon offsets are credits people buy and sell to say that a unit of carbon dioxide has been reduced from being emitted into the atmosphere, thereby reducing greenhouse gases.
This is a $54 million a year market today. It may be growing much bigger as states and the federal government move to address climate change. SB 722 simply says if you claim that you are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, then you should be able to demonstrate that you're doing that consistent with State Air Resources Board standards or other applicable laws. This bill is modeled on all other advertising, deceptive advertising laws too, in that it's enforceable by district attorneys, city attorneys, the Attorney General, and by private Attorney General actions. The bill is supported by the American Lung Association, the League of Conservation Voters, the Natural Resources Defense Council. Senator Steinberg asks for an aye vote.
Thank you very much. Witnesses in support.
Bonnie Holmesgen with the American Lung Association of California, and we do strongly support. We think it's important to establish state oversight and accountability over the offset program and make sure we're getting true greenhouse gas reductions and getting overall the greatest air quality public health benefits from the program.
Others in support.
Pete Price, California League of Conservation Voters. This is a straightforward bill to protect consumers in a way that they otherwise will not be protected. It's easy to have fraud in this arena, so we support the bill.
Thank you.
Move the bill.
Before it's been moved and seconded, before we hear from the opposition, because I don't wish to interrupt the flow of that testimony, we need to lift the call and other matters. If we can't come back to this, we will have a new hearing on this in the following meeting rather than require you to split the discussion. So let's lift the calls, please. Let's proceed. Yes, item number 1, SB 20, Senator Semidian. 4-3 is the current vote. Chair voting aye. Please call the roll.
Evans? Aye. Evans, aye. Krikorian? Aye. Krikorian, aye. Liu? Aye. Liu, aye.
Okay, that bill is out. Item number 3, Senator Lowenthal, SB 183. The vote is 4-3. Chair voting aye. Please call the roll.
Evans? Aye. Evans, aye. Krikorian?
Item number 3, SB 183.
Krikorian, aye. Liu? Aye. Liu, aye. It's out.
Okay, that bill is out. The next bill is item number 6, SB 303, Senator Alquist. The current vote is 4-3. Chair voting aye.
Evans? Aye. Evans, aye. Krikorian? Aye. Krikorian, aye. Liu? Aye. Liu, aye.
That bill is out. The next item is item number 9, SB 407, Senator Padilla. The vote is 5-3. Chair voting aye. Please call the roll.
Jones? Aye. Jones, aye. Krikorian? Krikorian, aye.
That bill is out. The next item is item number 12, SB 543 by Senator Leno. The vote is 5-3. Chair voting aye.
Jones? Aye. Jones, aye. Krikorian? Aye. Krikorian, aye.
That bill is out. Item 14 by Senator Liu, SB 629. The vote is 3-3. Chair voting aye. Please call the roll.
Evans? Jones? Aye. Jones, aye. Krikorian? Liu? Aye. Liu, aye.
That bill has 5. It is not out.